not China during their swearing-in ceremony in October.
We tell Beijing, don't think because we're so peaceful, then you can trample on us like that. And so I certainly hope that the Hong Kong people will exercise restraint and conduct our protests in a peaceful way.
Still in Hong Kong, a jury has found a British banker, Rurik Jutting, guilty of murdering 2 Indonesian women. Their mutilated bodies were found in his apartment in 2014. In a statement read out by his lawyer, Jutting expressed remorse for the killings and called his actions horrific. Those are the main stories here on TRT World. I'll be back with more news after Showcase coming up next.
Welcome to Showcase TRT about art in Pakistan. Mirrors aren't just meant for the wall in Tamar Nakash's new installation. The Mediterranean is a region of varied cultures and rich histories. An event dedicated to that diversity opened in Italy. The Med Film Festival features movies from Arab and European countries as well as Iran.
Film lovers arrive at the Savoy Cinema in Rome to attend the opening of the Med Film Festival. The event provides a stage to independent productions from Europe and countries that include Iran, Qatar, Jordan and Lebanon. This year, Egyptian director Yusri Nasrallah opened the festival. He's known with his political drama After the Battle. But his latest is Brooks, Meadows and Lovely Faces, a wedding-themed comedy drama. It tells the story of the brothers Rafat and Galal. They manage their father's catering business in a small Egyptian town.
I was thinking of doing a film about food, love, sex and freedom. This was the idea of my film. I didn't want to talk about corrupt parliament members and the corrupt government. I wanted a playful movie about something I love in life. In the end, I managed to do it, but it took me a long time until I found a way to do it.
Nasrallah hopes Egypt will someday be like Italy in terms of how cinema transformed its people.
Visconti, Rossellini, Pasolini started to make films after World War II. Italy was under fascism, lost the war and was destroyed. These directors started to make films. It's part of the wonderful things that they did teach Italians how to love themselves again and to make people love Italy again.
Arab and Iranian movies are hard to distribute in Italian cinemas, so the festival is a rare chance to see these movies.
We need to do a week-long full immersion to try to watch as many of these films as possible. To watch Lebanese, Jordanian, but also Greek and French movies from filmmakers of the southern Mediterranean. It's a great homage to an invisible cinema, but a little is better than nothing.
The Med Film Festival will continue to inspire intercultural dialogue between the two sides of the Mediterranean as it runs until Saturday.
Artists in Karachi want to make art in Pakistan more democratic. They're engaged in a revolt that is opening up art education to a wider student body and giving artists more places to show their work.
Art in Pakistan hasn't been open to everyone. Art galleries and art schools have been the preserve of a small liberal elite. But now teachers like Munawar Ali Saeed are trying to change that. Saeed teaches at the University of Karachi. 500 students here study architecture, design, media and filmmaking, textile design and graphic design.
I think efforts are being made, particularly in the art that is being practiced and produced in 2016, to make art accessible to the general public. The shame is that we don't have street art. We don't have public art museums where normal people can view and appreciate art. Generally, artworks are displayed at galleries that only cater to a certain specific clientele that belongs to a particular socioeconomic class. I believe this has to change, and I think it has changed to a certain extent.
And he's not the only one. Artist Shahana Munawar paints a mural on an upscale street in Karachi. Even a few years ago, this would have been unthinkable.
Artwork is usually mostly limited to art galleries, but street art has elicited an extremely positive response from the general public. It has been appreciated by those passing by, who often stop to congratulate us. There have even been cases where children have come up to us asking us to let them participate in this activity.
So what's behind this change? Well, technology has played a part, as young artists can better follow global trends. But there's also been a shift in attitudes.
I
would say art's purpose is to bring people closer, to make people talk to one another. Art isn't about sensationalizing an issue, but to bridge the gap between people, so that people interact with one another, talk about things that they usually don't talk about, or don't want to, or are not able to. So basically, art provides you with an environment that is conducive to such dialogue, such interactions, or provides a platform for that.
Karachi's new generation of artists are not only bringing art to a wider audience, but also changing perceptions about what Pakistani art can be.
Istanbul's third Design Biennale is taking place under the theme Are We Human? In his installation for the event, designer Tamer Nakışçı asks us to consider this question by taking a look in the mirror.
It's time to change our perspective. That's Tamer Nakışçı's aim with his new installation, Undesigned. It's a mirrored hexagon, and what we see in it depends on how we interact with it. It's being shown at the shopping centre Address Istanbul. It got in touch with the Istanbul Foundation for Culture and Arts to take part in this year's Design Biennale.
We specifically like this work because it deals a lot with the space and a lot with the perception. And as you know, the theme for this year's Biennale is Are We Human? So this is a great way for us to see the same subject matter in a lot of different perspectives, and it's really an experiential booth where we figured it really dwells with the subject matters that we like and are interested in.
Nakışçı included toys and props in the installation to rejuvenate our childlike wonder. Undesigned is part of the award-winning designer's wider project, The Future is Blank.
Tamer sees the invisible in the visible design, and he wants to create always something different, not a product, but something you can interact with. So I like his vision. As far as you can see here, you know, it's not a normal design. You can play with it, and you can sit on it, and you can do whatever you like. This is the interaction between design and human beings.
For Nakışçı, The Future is Blank means everything is possible. His work for the Biennale is like a kaleidoscope. In it, he shows us that what we perceive is constantly shifting, and it depends entirely on where we stand. Undesigned will be at Address Istanbul until November the 20th.
The The third Istanbul Design Biennale Avi Human, organised by the Istanbul Foundation for Culture and Arts, opened to the public on 22nd of October. The Biennale presents more than 70 projects by over 250 participants. One of those projects is by the famous young talent Tamer Nakışçı and his installation Future is Blank Undesigned. He's our guest today. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So, first of all, tell us about your installation Future is Blank Undesigned.
Well, the theme for the Design Biennale was, it was centered on the human. So, are we human? So, I wanted to actually do something that connects to people, that people can take a part with. And I didn't want to do something that was just designed. I just wanted to share the possibilities and once you complete a design, you just say no to all other possibilities. But with this one, I just want to take a step back and then not finish it, just keep it open, and then have people's ideas. And I wanted to just go to a place that is not designed. So that's the whole idea.
So it's actually about experiments, and you try to get people involved, especially in your installations.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you try to change people's perspective. How do you do that?
Well, if in the daily life, you just go through many things. You have your phones, you have your everything, and then you actually don't see things as they are. You lose your consciousness toward things. So you need some elements, you need some things through design maybe that changes your perspective, that you look at something from a different angle. It could be a cube like this, or it could be those mirror installations that gets you into a place that you don't expect, that you maybe look at something that you always see. And in this example, it's some people can go inside and they have, let's say, an umbrella. And once they take it inside and they just turn it, the umbrella turns into some other form of, because it becomes this kaleidoscopic visual. So it makes you look at things differently. And once we do it, we really realize every detail in life, and that makes us more happy, actually.
So you brought some props and you just showed the cube.
Exactly.
Could you maybe tell us how to see that, the installation's miniature version, I think?
Yeah. Well, we actually have a 3-meter size of this. So as you can see there, my fingers are here, but they don't look like fingers to you right now. And if you see my fingers, it's just like a finger. So that's the whole basic concept, and I just want to put people inside a giant kaleidoscope. So
just
when
imagining
they take a picture,
much bigger version of this actually, and being inside it, kind of.
Exactly. And once you have that, you suddenly see yourself in the center of a planet, or it just creates things that inspire people. It's not one thing, maybe it's nothing, but it can be everything. And people who come across to this installation go oh, you know what, we could try this, we could do that. And that's the whole point of the conversation and all this, this installation, is that it is open to people's perspectives, and it's nice to see how people react to it.
How are they reacting, actually? How is the feedback from visitors and artists?
Well, we had it's blank. It's Future is Blank means everything is possible. So we had this opening 2 days ago, and we just started blank, and then we also didn't know how it was going to be. But then all our artist friends, people who just step in, people who actually missed the opening also, now they're calling me, we have this idea, can we just come back one day and we can shoot this and that, and I want to come bring a parrot or something like that. Everybody's bursting with ideas, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. You could just go in, you just do your whole visual ideas, and then you just capture this thing. And also
you bring creativity actually to it.
Exactly. And this point that is it's not undesigned, is that it's just a mirror box in a way. It's nothing digital, it's nothing virtual, or it's nothing that is 3D or like design. It is just pure reality, and it's just yourself and your clothes, your things that you have. But those mirrors really simply connect you into a strange dimension. It's really exciting to do that.
So you were also chosen as one of Europe's 100 Young Creative Talents, which is one of the awards of many you received. At a very young age, your success story has been recognized internationally. And what do you think has made you earn this recognition? Is it your history, your culture, your childhood, or your talent?
Well, I guess a bit of everything. But my father was a carpenter, and I grew up into not the business, but into the form of making things, just putting things together. And I would go to the workshop after the closing hours, but I would also do things that are not designed. I would not go and make things, and I would just find the pieces that are just there, like scrap wood, and then try to make things with that. in a way, it showed me that my destiny is in my own hands. So everything is a step, by the way. You know, they say you cannot be successful if you don't know what you want, and it's not as it seems. It's like you just need to have you know, a goal, a simple goal, and you do it, and then you know that you're successful. And for me, it's been a long journey, but every one of those awards, every one of those things that I've done, product designs, this installation, everything was a step. And I think the key to this is to believe in yourself, to know that you can change the world, and just do things step by step and just go as it goes. It's like a bit like undesigned also.
And your surname also has history in it, actually, doesn't it?
Exactly. It comes from Nakkash, which is like you can say a sort of like a muralist. Those kind of ceiling decorations that are made out of wood. And my grandfather was doing that, and my father was doing this, and it's sort of...
So it's a bit of destiny, can
exactly,
we say that too?
He's from Gaziantep,
yes.
And I think it's like a heritage also, I can say.
And you said the Turkish approach to problem solving is to think outside the box, because everything is boiling, emotional, and when this meets creativity, it can result in interesting projects. So, as you said in your interview, do you believe creativity is part of Turkish culture, maybe?
I think everybody who has known a Turkish person, you know, knows that there's a bit of, you know, like, it's not... You know, we have a way of finding new solutions to things. It's a bit of like, we're like inventors in a way, in like little ways. And when we are directed to the right path, with the right, you know, maybe chance or whatever, but once we go through that, I think we really have this core of this like different thinking, because it's maybe because, you know, we make our own like rules in some, you know, like nice ways, and that kind of makes us think in different ways, thinking outside of the box. So I think that's something about being a Turkish designer was also really valuable about this.
So we'll be seeing a lot of your work, I think, as Europe's one of the young talents. Thank you very much, Tamer Nakkash, for being with us.
Thank you for inviting.
Still to come on Showcase. Concerts in Amman raise money for a new arts center at a Palestinian refugee camp. Drake, Justin Bieber and Shawn Mendes win big at the MTV European Music Awards. A South African girl writes a book at 6 and publishes it at 7. And now for a quick look at some other stories from the worlds of the arts and culture. Stay tuned for our news roundup shortcuts. Dalian Wanda, a company run by China's richest man, has agreed to pay $1 billion for a US firm that produces awards shows. It's the latest Hollywood takeover by Wanda, which Wang Jianjlin founded. He's buying Dick Clark Productions. It produces the Golden Globes, the Academy of Country Music Awards and the New Year Countdown show in New York. Wanda already owns a US movie production company and cinema chain. A biopic about Freddie Mercury and the rock band Queen is getting closer to production. Director Bryan Singer, who is best known for the movie The Usual Suspects, confirmed his involvement. But the million-dollar question is who will fill Mercury's shoes? Even though Sacha Baron Cohen's name came up first, it looks like Mr. Robot star Rami Malek is in line too to play the frontman. As the new year is approaching, thoughts in Hollywood are turning to the Oscars, and 2 first-timers have just been chosen to produce the show in February. They'll be Michael De Luca, best known for The Social Network and 50 Shades of Grey, and Jennifer Todd. She produced the Austin Powers series. The next announcement we're waiting is who will host the awards show. They used their voices to help the voiceless. Concerts were held over 2 days in Amman to raise money for the opening of an arts center in a Palestinian refugee camp in Jordan.
A choir's haunting songs not only move an audience, they're also doing good for refugees. The Jordanian group Tuning and Strings volunteered to perform at a fundraiser to build a performing arts centre at a Palestinian refugee camp. 2 days of concerts were held in Amman for the camp in Jerash in Jordan. One of the groups that organised them was an organisation run by volunteers called One Love.
When we visited the camp, we noticed there were many talented kids. But as you know, the schools there are limited. There are not many activities. So we wanted to establish this centre so it could unleash the talents of these young people and children at the camp.
Residents there hope the centre will provide a better future for their kids.
We would really like to have this place because it helps young people enhance their talents. It also increases their musical ability and their musical culture. It also boosts the skills that they already have.
The conductor of Tuning and Strings sees another benefit.
Music is the only thing that remains a positive thing at this time. Nowadays, we only hear bad news and news that annoys us. But through music, we wanted to bring joy into the hearts of people who need it. This is the time they need joy. Through our music, we want people to feel that there is hope, there is joy in life.
The residents of the camp may have left their belongings behind in the Gaza Strip, but they didn't leave their talent there. This initiative wants to give them a chance to use it.
Some of the world's biggest music stars, including Shawn Mendes, Bruno Mars and Green Day, walked the red carpet ahead of the MTV European Music Awards. But the absent Justin Bieber was the night's biggest winner.
Canadian artists dominated the MTV European Music Awards this year. The big winners included Justin Bieber, Shawn Mendes, Drake and The Weeknd. For the third year in a row, Bieber won Biggest Fans. He also took home trophies for Best Canadian Act and Best Song, making him the night's top winner. But he was just one of the many who were honoured who did not attend the show in Rotterdam.
I'm sorry we can't be there, but we really actually didn't think we would win.
Other big names who won but did not perform included Coldplay for Best Rock Act and Drake for Best Hip Hop Performer.
So sorry that I'm not there, I'm in Tokyo.
Lady Gaga was another victorious absentee. She took home trophies for Best Female Artist and Best Look.
The Weeknd featuring...
The Weeknd did make the trip to the Netherlands and was rewarded with the Best Video prize for Starboy, featuring Daft Punk. He beat out Beyoncé in the same category. She was tied with Bieber for the most nominations with 5. But Queen Bey failed to take home any awards.
Thank you. Shawn Mendes.
Shawn Mendes, a favourite with the many teenage girls in the audience, won in the Best Male category.
Everybody that worked so hard for me and my fans, of course, I love you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you.
The show featured performances by the who's who of the music industry. It kicked off with American funk revivalist Bruno Mars and his first big stage performance of 24K Magic. More memorable was the gutsy rendition of Waste a Moment by the Kings of Leon. Best Push winners, DNCE, brought an element of spectacle to the party, performing on a steel platform floating over the audience.
Together for global icons,
Veteran punk rockers Green Day went home with the MTV Global Icon Award and gave the night a political tinge.
It's nice to be out of America just for a second because of this horrendous election that's going on right now. Our entire country is about to have one big collective heart attack.
The band closed the show with its 2004 song American Idiot, which was its protest against George W. Bush administration.
Hey, can you hear the sound of this?
Now, the group performed it with somewhat different lyrics.
The subliminal mind Trump America. Zara Larson!
The awards handed out in all 17 categories this year were coloured purple in honour of Prince, who died in April. The awards provided a chance to look back and look forward to what the music industry might bring us in the future.
One day, 6-year-old Michelle Nikamankeng came out of her room and showed her mother a book she had written. By the time she was 7, the book had been published, making Michelle one of the youngest authors in the world.
Most children spend their time watching cartoons or playing sports. But Michelle Nikamankeng, a 7-year-old from South Africa, writes books. Her first Waiting for the Waves was inspired by a family visit to the beach. It's about a little girl named Titi who confronts and overcomes her fear of the waves with the help of her family.
Titi shouts happily as she runs back to her family.
Michelle wrote the book in secret when she was 6 because she wanted to surprise her parents. And they were overwhelmed.
She loved reading a lot, but in the part of writing, it didn't come across my mind. So it was like a shock, you know, like when you are shocked, you don't even know what to say, you're speechless. I'm overwhelmed. It's not easy for a mom to have a 7-year-old child who wrote a book in 6 years old. Mostly in our African continent, it's not common, it's rare.
This is the manic scripture.
The book that Michelle showed her mother Lolo was written by hand. Michelle had folded its pages in half and stapled it together to look like a real book. Lolo Nikamankeng put the book away on a bookshelf, but that was not enough for her daughter.
I said to my mother, if you don't publish this book, I will never write books again.
So her parents found an artist to illustrate it and publish the book themselves. Michelle wants to be a pediatrician when she grows up, but she also plans to keep writing. She's already written 3 books and uses her homework to expand her vocabulary.
I feel happy, excited, and proud of myself.
Michelle also wants to inspire other children. She's been promoting the book and speaking to other school kids about following their dreams. It turns out, overcoming a fear of the ocean was just the beginning of her story.
That's it on Showcase TRT World Istanbul for now. We'll be back soon with more from the worlds of arts and culture. I'm Ayça Aydoğdu. Thank you for joining us. Bye for now.
From Wall Street to Main Street and the people in power, money talks, and so do we. Corruption, technology, jobs, if it affects you, it affects us. We have reports from around the world and hear from the people in the know to make financial news your business. Wherever there's money, there's a story. Join me, Matthew Moore, for Money Talks on TRT World.
US voters go to the polls in one of the most bitter and divisive presidential elections in living memory. Hello there, welcome to TRT World, live from London. I'm Shuli Ghosh. Also coming up on the programme. Entirely liberated, Peshmerga forces say they've recaptured a key city on the outskirts of Mosul. Turkey says it has a deal with the United States to prevent the YPG from entering Raqqa. And that sinking feeling. A large section of road in Japan is swallowed whole. US voters are heading to the polls to choose a new president after perhaps the most bitterly fought campaign in a generation. Both candidates are now in New York after wrapping up their campaigns. Hillary Clinton has already cast her vote with her husband Bill in the town of Chappaqua, where they live. Donald Trump has just been casting his ballot in Manhattan.
It was the most humbling feeling, Dan, because, you know, I know how much responsibility goes with this, and so many people are counting on the outcome of this election, what it means for our country, and I'll do the very best I can if I'm fortunate enough to win today.
These are the latest pictures just in of Republican candidate Donald Trump. He's just arrived to vote in Manhattan in New York. Well, let's cross to John Brain, who is at a polling station in New York. And John, you've been talking to voters. How are they feeling about this election?
Well, I think most people are just relieved that we've got to this stage where it's finally over after all these months of acrimonious campaigning. This is one of 4,500 polling stations just in New York City alone. This is a strongly Democrat area, expected to go to Hillary Clinton. We've been, excuse the dogs barking there, we've been talking to people at random, as is Jessica and Joni. We've come across, I have no idea how they voted. You've just come out of the polling stations. Let me first ask how you voted.
I voted Democratic.
I voted Democratic. Right, well, everybody we've spoken to so far here has voted Democratic, right. But that's to be expected here in this particularly Democrat area. What about the campaign as a whole? What do you think about the tone of it?
It was very ugly, very tension-producing, acrimonious, horrible. I'm glad it's over. And I'm just a little fearful about what's to come, no matter who wins.
Yeah, I agree with her, and I think that being very Hillary Clinton biased, I think that she was pushed into being as angry and, you know, not so nice as she was by her opponent. Had it been somebody else, I don't think it would have been quite as divisive as it was.
It's fair to say, though, that Donald Trump, maybe not here, where we are in Greenwich Village, as you say, but he has got support, wide support in America. There are obviously issues he's raised that need to be addressed.
Yes,
true, yes. I mean, I'm concerned about safety here in the United States, but I don't know that he will do anything further to protect us than the Democrats.
The problem with him is, in my opinion, is he said a lot of things, but he never said how he's going to do these things. I mean, how is he going to build a wall? There was no answer to any of his plans, any of the issues. I mean, I could have gotten up and said, I'm going to build a wall. Well, I don't know how I'm going to build a wall.
As well. What's this? Women can stop Trump.
That's
okay,
right.
Okay, well, what if Hillary Clinton wins, as the polls at the moment are suggesting she needs to do? What can she do to unite this country?
To unite this country, I think that's a really humongous task to do that. There's lots of things I expect and want from her, but I can say that I think one of the most important things after the results come out of this election, no matter which way they go, and I think they're probably leaning towards Hillary very strongly, but is that we need a strong Republican Party that has good ideas and puts them forth very clearly. And I'm unlikely to vote for Republicans in my lifetime, but I think they need to be a very strong party that respect Americans broadly, of course women, of course other minorities, and when they don't, it crumbles. And as is the case this time, I think Trump really tapped into some severe anger among traditional Republican supporters and others. And the fact that the Republican Party was not putting forth good ideas and solutions and addressing the needs, particularly of lower class white Americans, has really come out in a form they didn't predict and I couldn't have foreseen. It's very disappointing to see the anger, but it's real, and I think we've seen something new. It needs to be addressed. So the Democratic Party has their policies they've been putting forth, and I think that generally speaking, those can go forward. But what I want, maybe one of the things I want most is for the Republican Party to really address what's happened and see how they can better address issues in the U.S.
Okay, thank you very much, all three of you. I just want to ask you very briefly, are you more or less optimistic about the future of America now? Just one would answer.
The results of today really have me feeling it's hard to answer that, but I am optimistic.
I'm optimistic when Hillary Clinton wins because I think she'll follow through with Obama's situation.
Less optimistic. Well, thank you all very much indeed. As I've been saying, it's not really a representative sample here because we're in a bit of a democratic heartland, but some very interesting views from these Hillary Clinton supporters. Of course, Donald Trump supporters elsewhere with something different to say, but of course we're going to have to wait a few more hours to find out the result and to see if the positivism or the negativism is justified. Shuli.
Indeed, but I love the fact that, that the voter brought her dog along to vote as well. Shows inclusivity there. John, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, as it is election day, of course, security has been heightened all across the country. Will Denslow joins me from one of the most iconic places in New York, Times Square. And Will, is security a concern there today?
Well, of course, a heightened sense of security isn't unusual here in New York's Times Square, but for the first time in over 70 years, both US presidential candidates will be here in New York City, and the NYPD, the New York Police Department, certainly taking no chances. Now, James O'Neill, the commissioner of the NYPD, says that there has been no credible threat to Manhattan or to New York City, but they will have the biggest security presence on the streets that the United States and that New York has ever seen for a US presidential election. Now, to put that into some kind of context, we'll see the same amount of security, roughly the same, as Times Square receives for the New Year's Eve celebrations, even comparable to the Pope's visits back last year. Now, New York's Mayor Bill de Blasio says a double-edged sword of having an extra sense of security, not only to help residents feel safe, but also to clamp down on any potential voter intimidation that might occur here in the city.
Yeah, tell us a bit about the voting process, because, of course, we've been hearing claims from Donald Trump all along in this campaign that there's going to be vote rigging, there's going to be fraud, there's going to be intimidation. You know, is that a real concern? What safeguards are in place against those kind of things?
Well, essentially, according to polls, many analysts here in the United States, and they've been speaking quite frequently since Donald Trump really made these allegations, even said at that third and final infamous presidential debate that he'd leave the US people in suspense as to voter intimidation, voter fraud in the United States. But of course, all analysts and all authorities doing everything they can to really make sure that that is in no way, sense or form going to factor into these results. Now, we have heard from Donald Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr. He's spoken on to the US media. He said that Donald Trump will accept the results of the elections, but only if they deem them to be fair.
Will, thanks very much indeed for that. And, of course, we'll have more on the race for the White House coming up later on this bulletin. Iraq's military command says the Kurdish Peshmerga has fully retaken the town of Bashika, just northeast of Mosul. Now they're searching buildings for possible militants and clearing booby traps. The ground assault to recapture the town was launched on Monday, backed by US-led coalition jets. It's part of a larger operation to retake Mosul, Daesh's stronghold in Iraq. Meanwhile, Iraqis fleeing Mosul have spoken of their final days before their escape.
10 days we have been living under airstrikes for 10 days. We could not escape. All directions were blocked. The army would shell the Daesh militants in the area. Then when the army captured the town, Daesh began retaliating.
The situation was tragic. It was bad. There was no food, no water, and airstrikes targeted us.
Well, TRT World's Nicole Johnston is in Bashika and sent this report.
After a day and a night of fighting, the Peshmerga forces have retaken the town of Bashika. Now, this was a largely Yazidi town. There are also Christians and Shabak living here, but now it's mostly deserted. All of the civilians left, which is at least one thing that made it a bit easier for the Peshmerga forces to come in here and battle Daesh. You can see now the big task is trying to clear this city, to clean it. There are improvised explosive devices. The town's been booby-trapped. Daesh had 2 years to prepare for this battle, but it was all over in one day. Now the next mission for the Peshmerga forces will be to capture any other remaining villages or towns still held by Daesh, but largely the forces say that they have completed capturing most of the areas that they wanted to. They'll now maintain their line of control and allow Iraqi forces to move deeper into Mosul and continue that battle.
The US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces are making progress in taking back the northern city of Raqqa. The SDF says it's captured 11 villages and rural areas north of Daesh's stronghold in Syria. Turkey has been opposed to this offensive on Raqqa because a majority of the fighters are from the YPG, which is the Syrian branch of the PKK terror group. US and Turkish military leaders held talks on the issue in Ankara on Sunday and agreed to develop a long-term plan for seizing and governing Raqqa. Meanwhile, regime forces in Aleppo have pushed rebels back who were trying to break the siege in the east. TRT World's Edis Tianshan is in Gaziantep for us. So what's the latest on that fighting in eastern Aleppo, Edis?
Well, the fighting between the Syrian regime and the opposition groups still continue unabated, particularly in the critical city of Aleppo. Remember, back in July when the peace talks and the latest ceasefire agreement between both sides collapsed, the Syrian regime had launched a new offensive to take the entire city from the rebel groups. They surrounded the eastern rebel-held part of the city and managed to impose a siege on this town, leaving 250,000 civilians completely cut off from the rest of the world and unable to access a much desperately needed humanitarian aid. And since then, for many months now, the rebel groups had been trying to break this siege. In their first earlier attempt, they managed to capture some ground, particularly a district called the 1070 apartments in southeast Aleppo. They were going to move on from there in an attempt to break the siege, but we understand that as of today, according to the latest footage released by the Syrian regime-owned media, we understand that that district now is recaptured by the Syrian regime from the rebel groups, and so effectively the attempt by rebel groups to break the siege is foiled, and in fact they lost further ground. We understand that this fighting will continue as the Syrian regime is keen on clearing this entire city from rebel groups, but remember that their number is a fraction compared to the total population of 250,000 who continue to suffer because of these attacks.
And we've been hearing about more airstrikes in Idlib province, which have killed several civilians. What do you know about that?
Well, indeed, when it comes to fighting between the regime and the opposition groups, remember that the regime had deployed their aerial force in many parts of the country as they fight these opposition groups. And one of the latest airstrikes came earlier in the province of Idlib, which is in northern Syria. We understand that at least 7 children and 2 pregnant women were killed in these airstrikes. So it was obviously a residential area, and the footage obtained by activists on the ground shows the amount of destruction, heavy destruction there following these attacks. And it wasn't just the Idlib province. We're also getting reports of further airstrikes in suburbs just outside Damascus. Remember, the capital is a regime stronghold, but it is surrounded by many areas that are still under the rebel control, and the government and the regime rather continues to strike these areas consistently. In the latest attack, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, in the eastern Ghouta suburb just outside of Damascus, at least 11 civilians were killed and dozens more were wounded. And we also understand that the activists are telling us that now, for the past few days, these airstrikes by the regime has been significantly intensified.
Edis, thank you. Edis Tianshan in Gaziantep there. Still to come here on the programme, a silent show of support for 2 lawmakers blocked from taking office in Hong Kong. And the more it eats, the bigger it grows. An expanding sinkhole swallows a 4-lane intersection in southern Japan.
The Ebola outbreak was first reported in March
10,000 people have died.
The Ebola virus is still rife.
The virus has rapidly become one of the deadliest diseases in the world.
Imagine what it would be like to lose all the mountains in the world. Once it's gone, it's gone.
And we really have to start changing our behavior. Otherwise, this will be all water really soon.
Welcome back to TRT World. I'm Shuli Ghosh. Just remind you of our top stories now. Polls have opened in the US presidential election. The two candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, have both cast their ballots in New York. On Monday, they had their last opportunity to appeal to voters.
From a once-in-a-lifetime change, we're going to have real change, not Obama change.
A choice between division or unity, between an economy that works for everyone or only those at the top.
But while the US presidential campaign has been truly bitter at some points, it's also had its fair share of funny and quirky moments. TRT World's Colin Campbell joins us from Washington, D.C. And let's be honest, Colin, I mean, there's been so much brutality and insults in this campaign.
Yeah.
It's needed a few quirky moments, hasn't it?
Yeah, there has been some levity, of course. So you can imagine this is nothing short of an event here in the U.S. And right now, the big conversation is pantsuits to the polls. This is where people dress up to vote for their preferred candidate, Hillary Clinton, who's known for her very unique fashion sense of wearing those pantsuits. Not only has this been seen on the campaign trail at the voting booth, but also online. There is a secret group on Facebook that people are invited to come and join, and that's called Pantsuits Nation. And people have been joining. They already got about 2 million members in the first several hours that they started to invite people. So it seems that pantsuits may become a thing in the U.S. after a while. That's if Hillary Clinton is the victor after all. But not only that, there's some other weird things along the campaign trail that we've seen. Those who were afraid of Donald Trump winning could move to Canada. Apparently, Canada has an area or an island where people could rusticate to if Donald Trump wins, and they have no desire to stick around here in the United States. But just say you're a single person and you're looking for that perfect match. If Donald Trump wins, you can join Maple Match, another product out of Canada, who matches you up with a Canadian that you could, I suppose, marry and seek citizenship in Canada if Donald Trump wins. So you have those oddities along the campaign trail. And earlier I talked about how President Obama spent the day playing basketball, something he's done since 2008 as part of his superstitious side. Also, Donald Trump, he voted in New York earlier, just within the past hour in New York and in his area that he lives. And before he showed up, however, there were some people who rushed the voting area, rushed past Secret Service, and stripped topless to protest some of the things that Donald Trump has been saying that have been considered misogynistic towards women. So lots of crazy things happening along this campaign trail, keeping a little bit of levity amid this vitriol that we've all been experiencing.
Okay, well, I'm sure we're not going to show the pictures of women stripping topless for Donald Trump.
Definitely not. No, definitely
you know, Donald Trump
no.
has also been, he's been talking a lot about draining the swamp in Washington, D.C., where you are, and I expect a lot of state officials took offense at that.
Yeah, you can imagine Donald Trump saying some things that would be controversial. Imagine that. But Washington, D.C., as we know, was built on a swamp, so he's using that colorful imagery of draining the swamp, trying to rid Washington of all of its corruption, and that's how he uses that metaphor of draining the swamp. Of course, you have those who do believe that Washington is corrupt. There's lots of gridlock in Washington, and that does need to be ameliorated. So those who agree with that would definitely support Trump. But of course, that colorful imagery there. You can't deny that it could be deemed as controversial, and those who actually support Hillary Clinton may say that what he's saying is very divisive, and that is not uncommon for Hillary Clinton supporters to say about Donald Trump, because he said so many things along the campaign trail that have been raising eyebrows.
Great to speak with you, Colin. Thank you very much indeed. Colin Campbell in Washington, D.C. there.
Okay. We'll see.
And we will, of course, be bringing you all our coverage of the US election on TRT. Well, we've got a special programme hosted by Imran Garda that starts at 2100 GMT. And you can watch and find out who will be the next president of the United States. Now, the European Union has expressed concern over recent developments in Turkey, urging Ankara to uphold democratic standards. The EU's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, called on Turkey to resume political dialogue with opposition groups. The 28-member bloc also condemned the attempted coup in July. It emphasised the need for the rule of law and the protection of human rights. Well, TRT World's Hassan Abdullah has more on Turkey's reaction to EU concerns on democracy.
An official at the Turkish Foreign Ministry has called these comments misplaced. He said that those issuing such statements leave the impression that they're either unaware of political realities and processes or choose to claim for themselves moral high ground based on arrogant colonial attitude. He's also said that perhaps some Western governments should try and allow Daesh or other terrorist sympathizers into their parliaments and then protect their democratic rights. We also have a statement from the Turkish presidency, and it says that Turkey expects respect for its democracy and political processes made by the democratically elected government. We also expect support for our fight against terrorist groups. The negative statements we receive from our European allies during this crucial time are misplaced, a matter of concern, and could affect the alliance between Turkey and the European Union.
Lawyers in Hong Kong are holding a silent protest against Beijing's decision to ban 2 elected lawmakers from taking office. Dressed in black, local and foreign lawyers walked from the High Court to the Court of Final Appeal. The march took place a day after the Chinese Parliament banned the pro-independence lawmakers from office. They'd carried a banner that read, "Hong Kong is not China," during their swearing-in ceremony in October.
I believe the majority of the Hong Kong people support us protesting in a peaceful and orderly way. Maybe a big one, maybe a small one, but still, most people want it to be peaceful and orderly. Every day we turn on the television screen, we see these very violent clashes in Europe, in the Middle East, in America. But here, it's very peaceful, and we want to preserve that. But then we tell Beijing, don't think because we're so peaceful, then you can trample on us like that. And so I certainly hope that the Hong Kong people will exercise restraint and conduct our protests in a peaceful way.
A sinkhole in southern Japan has swallowed an entire 4-lane intersection in the city of Fukuoka. The hole is about 50 metres deep and caused a power outage. Authorities are worried the buildings on either side could collapse. City officials are now working to prevent it from growing further and have ordered people to evacuate the area. Now, just before we go, we'll leave you with a performance of one of the many celebrities that have come out to show their support for one of the presidential candidates. Let's see pop superstar Lady Gaga performing in support of Hillary Clinton in North Carolina. Your headlines coming up next.
Put your hands up for Hillary Clinton. Let's go! My mama told me when I was young, we were all superstars. She held my hand with my lipstick on, in a glass of covered wine. Come on, let's go! It doesn't matter going who
Insight later, that was the campaign that was. After 18 months of the most brutal and base election campaign in living memory, is the American body politic irrevocably damaged? Irrespective of who wins the presidency, is the process of politics badly in need of repair? Who can unite the divided states of America? That's Insight, later on TRT World.
Excited to see the next technological breakthrough.
We landed on Mars.
Everyone should have the right to an education.
Less talking, more action.
A cure for cancer.
Homelessness is an issue that is very close to all.
Plus de respect pour everyone, man and
Over my head is all I need. To end the war on terror. Extinguishing family poverty.
A better understanding of mental health. Recomienda en las escuelas para los female president of the US.
To end the war on terror.
A revolution.
Are you ready? Who's going to pay for the wall?
I'm going to do everything I can. My husband Bill is there.
He loves beauty contests.
Said she doesn't have the stamina.
The world is just a click away. Get the latest news from around the globe with fast and accurate coverage at trtworld.com.
Hello there, you're watching TRT World. I'm Shuli Ghosh. Let's remind you of our main stories now. Voters in the US are casting their ballots in the presidential election after perhaps the most bitterly fought contest in a generation. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have voted after wrapping up their campaigns in North Carolina and Michigan.
We're excited. It's a great opportunity. There's tremendous enthusiasm from everybody. You see it all over the country, all over the world. It's been a great feeling.
It is the most humbling feeling, Dan, because, I know how much responsibility goes with this, and so many people are counting on the outcome of this election, what it means for our country, and I'll do the very best I can if I'm fortunate enough to win today.
Iraq's military command says the Kurdish Peshmerga have fully retaken the town of Bashika, just northeast of Mosul. They're now searching buildings for Daesh fighters and clearing booby traps. The ground assault to recapture the town was launched on Monday, backed by US airstrikes. It's part of a larger operation to retake Mosul, Daesh's stronghold in Iraq. Meanwhile, Iraqis fleeing Mosul have spoken of their final days before their escape.
10 days we have been living under airstrikes for 10 days. We could not escape. All directions were blocked. The army would shell the Daesh militants in the area. Then when the army captured the town, Daesh began retaliating.
The situation was tragic. It was bad. There was no food, no water, and airstrikes targeted us.
In Syria, airstrikes have killed at least 7 children and 2 pregnant women in Idlib province. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the strikes targeted the rebel-held town of Khan Shaykhun. It's still unknown whether the Syrian regime or the Russian military carried out the attacks. Lawyers in Hong Kong are holding a silent protest against Beijing's decision to ban 2 elected lawmakers from taking office. Dressed in black, local and foreign lawyers walked from the High Court to the Court of Final Appeal. The march took place a day after the Chinese parliament banned pro-independence lawmakers from the Legislative Council. They'd carried a banner reading "Hong Kong is not China" during their swearing-in ceremony in October. That's it. Insight is next.
Vicious and brutal to the bitter end, as America chooses its new president, we'll ask how anyone can heal the divisions in the United States. I'm Martin Stanford. This is Insight. Welcome to Insight. The 45th American president will walk into the Oval Office in January to lead a deeply divided United States. While it's not unusual for US elections to produce close to a 50-50 split in the popular vote, very few campaign battles have been as bitter and brutal as the one between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. In this program, we'll explore those divisions and ask what it means for the country's political future. First, here's a reminder of how we got here.
And I'm a candidate for President of the United States of America.
And I'm a candidate for president.
I am a candidate for president. For president of the greatest country in the world.
For president of the United States.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
I'm running for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. I think we have a message that resonates. I think it's going to resonate all over this country. Don't underestimate me.
Americans have fought their way back from tough economic times, but the deck is still stacked in favor of those at the top. Everyday Americans need a champion, and I want to be that champion. I'm running for president.
Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud. His promises are as worthless as a degree from Trump University.
The first objective of the President of the United States needs to be to keep us safe. And you can't keep us safe by talking trash without backing it up with serious plans.
Either they pay up, including for past deficiencies, or they have to get out. And if it breaks up NATO, it breaks up NATO. Nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people. Hillary wants to essentially abolish the Second Amendment. Nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is, I don't know. Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. I would bomb the out of them. I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? Poorly educated. I love the poorly educated. I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you. And I'm afraid the election's going to be rigged, I have to be honest. Sometimes, in the heat of debate and speaking on a multitude of issues, you don't choose the right words.
Words matter, my friends. And if you are running to be president or you are president of the United States, words can have tremendous consequences.
Donald Trump consistently smears the character of Muslims. Have you even read the United States Constitution? I will gladly lend you my copy.
As offensive and toxic as Mr. Trump's rhetoric is, it does not condone or justify any act of violence.
A candidate who has, in fact, in many ways encouraged violence. When he talks about, things I wish we were in the old days when you could punch somebody in the head.
I'm a unifier. I know people are going to find that a little bit hard to believe, but believe me, I am a unifier. Part of the problem and part of the reason it takes so long is nobody wants to hurt each other anymore, right? And They're being politically correct the way they take them out. So it takes a little bit longer. And honestly, protesters, they realize it. They realize that there are no consequences to protesting anymore. There used to be consequences. There are none anymore.
Tonight, we've reached a milestone in our nation's march toward a more perfect union. The first time that a major party has nominated a woman for president.
And because of Hillary Clinton, my daughters and all our sons and daughters now take for granted that a woman can be president of the United States.
I respect women. I love women. I cherish women. You know, Hillary Clinton said he shouldn't cherish. Well, I said, I do cherish. I cherish women.
I moved on her, actually. You know, she was down in Palm Beach. I moved on her, and I failed. I'll admit it.
Whoa.
I did try and her. She was married.
He thinks that because he has money, that he can call women fat pigs and bimbos. He thinks because he is a celebrity, that he can rate women's bodies from 1 to 10. He thinks that because he has a mouthful of Tic Tacs, that he can force himself on any woman within groping distance. Well, I got news for you, Donald Trump. Women have had it with guys like you.
We love Donald, yes we do. We love Donald, yes we do. Bring back jobs and we'll love you. Bring back jobs and we'll love you.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
Hillary Clinton is the most corrupt person ever to seek the office of the presidency of the United States.
People look at the Statue of Liberty and they see a proud symbol. Donald looks at the Statue of Liberty and sees a 4. Maybe a 5 if she loses the torch and tablet and changes her hair.
Madam President, oh, I don't want to hear that. I do want to hear it eventually, because I want to see a woman become president, but it can't be her. She's a disaster. She's a disaster. She'll set you back a long way, women, if that happens. It'll be a long way before it happens again. You better be careful what you wish for.
Well, to discuss that further, I'm joined by Inderjeet Palmer, a professor of international politics at City University of London. He also serves as the chair of the Obama Research Network. Alongside him is Daniel Cato. He's a lecturer in US politics at Queen Mary University of London. Inderjeet Palmer, has US politics, do you think, changed forever?
Forever is a very long time. I don't know that it's changed forever, but certainly this is probably the most divisive election in living memory for most people. And it has changed some of the rules of the game of politics, what can be said by a leading candidate, what the relationship is between the leading candidate and the actual political parties, the fact that a socialist candidate stood and won 13 million votes, and were it not for some machinations perhaps by the Democratic National Committee, may have come a lot closer, if not won the nomination. So American politics has changed, and it's going to continue to have to change, actually, because, if you like, one of the major candidates, Donald Trump, is an anti-politics candidate, somebody who is expressing a genuine feeling, which is very deep and wide across the electorate, that the American political system is far removed from their concerns and actual anxieties and their lives.
How easy is it for any candidate to address all the needs of an electorate? Is it possible to find a centre ground when the needs of the electorate are so diverse?
We saw that in 2008 with Barack Obama, his speech about we're not the red states, we're not the blue states, we're the United States of America. I actually think, I'm not quite sure how productive that is as a politician. Hillary is not going to win, is not going to make that kind of argument. And I think she's more of a politician than what Barack Obama is. So actually might get more things done in the first 100 days than Barack Obama did. So I don't quite see the necessity of getting a consensus. I just see the necessity of winning elections.
So you need to form enough of a coalition between maybe people who are permanently to the left or to the right, But it's the centre ground. I know we come back to this in political discussions all the time. It's enough of those centre ground people, or the people who are maybe going to swing one over the other. That's the important thing. And it's interesting how neither of the candidates in 2016 appear to have had much time for the centre ground.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. I think the electoral results, I'm predicting that it'll be maybe even equivalent to 2012 election. I think Hillary Clinton will get around above 300 electoral votes. If that's the case, and the Democrats can control the Senate, can win some seats in the House, you're going to put the House Republicans in disarray. And so I think there is a window of opportunity there where things can get done. A lot of it has to do with how unified the Democrats can be and how disunified the Republican Party might actually be.
And does that mean that the anti-politics candidate, there won't be another one? Donald Trump will go down in history as a one-off?
I don't think so. I think he expresses a great deal on left and right in the American political system today. So if you look at the campaign of Bernie Sanders, a lot of that was against the big powers in Wall Street, against the established political elite establishment, which was in hock to the big money from there. Donald Trump early on also had that sort of rhetoric too. He talks about the system being rigged. Sanders talked about the billionaire class which controls.
In some ways, they were the flip side of the same coin, weren't they?
And that's where I think the left, right, and centre, those terms of political discourse that we often use, I don't think they apply as well much anymore.
It used to be a fairly well-mannered. I mean, it's all full of colourful language. We understand that, and you know, campaign vocabulary tends to get a little bit excessive. But at least there was an essence of decorum about it, because after all, the president of the United States is the equivalent to a monarch. I mean, it's the head of the whole country, isn't it? This year, this time round, this 18 months, it's been sleaze and personal behaviour that no candidate hitherto would have even survived 5 minutes.
I think that's right. And I think there has been a new sort of a platform established for the kind of politics and the kind of discourse which would appear to be acceptable. But I think we have to see this in a slightly historical context, in that from the mid-1990s, in fact, after Bill Clinton was elected to office, and the contract with America that Newt Gingrich launched then, the vitriol, the lack of legitimacy for the opposition, for the Democratic Party and the administration, which was then declared, and the attaching to each time a Democrat or a liberal or a Clinton was referred to with an epithet of corrupt or liar or cheat or liberal even or whatever, that language has been developing for a long time. And that partisanship, which says what you say is untrue, what I say is true, and two communities living in different worlds. What Donald Trump has done is taken it to a higher level. But he is not solely responsible for it, but he has established a new platform for what is acceptable.
And do you think that's difficult for politics to row back from? I mean, now you don't know what kind of insults you can throw at each other in 4 years' time, because they've thrown criminal and, you know, insulting to women and all these other kind of insults which may or may not be justified to one another. How much deeper can it go?
We'll see. I think Jason Chaffetz is already talking about impeachment trials if Hillary wins the office. And so I think, again, it goes back to, let's see what Paul Ryan does, the Speaker of the House for the Republican Party. How is he going to come back and try to be more moderate, or is he going to cater to the extremists of his party? This is a political decision. We saw this in 2012 with the autopsy of the RNC. Rice Priebus thought we have to be more moderate if we're going to win the presidential election in 2016. Unfortunately, it didn't go that way. But it didn't have to. This didn't have to happen.
Because the ability to get things done means that inevitably, if you get different parties ruling the three great offices of state in terms of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, there needs to be an element of collaboration. And however the individuals concerned didn't particularly like each other, they used to try and get along and get stuff done. Obama surely will go down in history as the president who's had the least success, whether that's down to his personality or just the circumstances he was dealing with. He's got very little done in 8 years. Would you agree?
I think that is right. I think partly it's to do with the fact that he has no real kind of developed political skills, like somebody like Lyndon Johnson, for example, who was able to get a civil rights bill through a House dominated by...
What skills do you think he's lacking then?
I think it's the ability to lobby, the ability to actually reach out to people in a way which is not hurt and resentful as a result of their criticism of him, is to have a very thick skin as a political operator. And I don't think he has it. But second thing is, I think probably more fundamental, is that the partisanship has gone to such a high degree that it's almost impossible for ideologically committed hard-right Republicans to see that they have anything in common whatsoever with the Democratic Party.
And even if they wanted to, Daniel, to reach out and, I don't know, back a bill or support something that the Democrats wanted to do, what their leaders are selling to them, no, this is all-out war, no compromise. I mean, they've been guilty of that, don't you think, over the last few years?
Yes, they have. And if the Democrats win some seats in the House, it'll be interesting to see, because the Freedom Caucus, which is the extreme wing of the Republican Party, will actually have more power. So Republicans in general will have less power. The Freedom Caucus, though, will have more power. But going back to your previous point, I actually think Obama did do a lot. Affordable Care Act, the nuclear deal with Iran. He killed more people with drone strikes than George W. Bush ever did. So I think he actually has gotten a lot of things done. Unfortunately, not a lot of it is what liberals might have wanted, but that's a different story than he's going to get anything done.
OK, we'll continue our conversation and talk about the consequences for the two parties. You're watching Insight. Coming in a moment, more discussion of the divisions in the United States.
Every day there is a newsmaker. It could be a person, a city, an event, a conflict. And the newsmakers affect us all. The conversations are in-depth and balanced. They come to life with guests from around the world exploring all sides of a story. It's real and it's honest. It's the newsmakers on TRT World.
Welcome back. In a moment, we'll continue to discuss the fallout from the US election campaign. But first, here are some other stories to keep an eye on. A giant sinkhole has emerged at the intersection of a street in Tokyo. 5 lanes of the usually busy street were swallowed by the 20-meter pit, which appeared just outside Hakata Station. South Korea, the United States and the UK are conducting air drills until November the 10th. Trilateral exercises are taking place at Asan Air Base in South Korea. And Samsung's headquarters in South Korea have been raided as part of a probe into a political scandal. Prosecutors are looking into whether the company improperly provided financial assistance to a friend of the president. Well, back now to our discussion of the US election campaign and the deep divisions that have emerged in American society. Professor Inderjeet Palmer and Dr. Daniel Cato are with us in the studio. Inderjeet Palmer, what do you think now? Let's deal with the Republican Party, because we had the Tea Party phenomenon. That, in some way, has been almost overtaken or eclipsed by the Donald Trump phenomenon. What next for Republicanism, irrespective of who's president?
I think it's very interesting. That's probably one of the most interesting things to be looking at right now. I think the Republican Party's leadership has been in a real crisis. They haven't really known how to handle Donald Trump. What Donald Trump has shown is that you don't actually have to be a conservative, that is low taxes, small government, a Republican to win the nomination, which is the first time since 1980 that's been recognized. He's left that party leadership behind. If he were to win the presidency, I think the actual game changes, and I think it changes in directions which are probably quite favorable to the Republican Party. In a way, Donald Trump has to collaborate with the leadership in order to get anything done about all the promises he's made. And I suspect that, given that he's also rode back from many of his anti-conservative rhetoric and ideas early on, towards appointing people who are hardcore conservatives to his campaign transition team, like Ed Filner, who's the former president of the Heritage Foundation, I think this could well be a way in which the Republican Party reunifies around a very conservative platform in practice, and actually probably has the most conservative platform Republicans have ever had.
So the Trump campaign, you could see, might be a good thing. Daniel, let me ask you the equivalent question about the Democrat Party. They threw away a socialist in questionable circumstances, as I think referred to earlier on, and they've got a traditional, professional, long-term, centre-left candidate in Hillary Clinton. What do you think are the ramifications for the Democrat Party going forward?
Ironically, I think if the Democrats win the Senate, Bernie Sanders will come out a winner. He will become the chair of the Budget Committee. So between Bernie Sanders, what Elizabeth Warren's doing, what Russ Feingold, who's probably going to win the Senate seat in Wisconsin, there's going to be a push from the Senate left on Hillary. And Hillary at least seems, at this point now, amenable to those pressures. So that'll be interesting to see. I think she'll push for comprehensive immigration reform in the first 100 days, partly because I think there's a huge demand. You see that with Hispanic voters, along with it creates further disarray within the Republican Party. And then when it comes to the foreign policy decisions, that's where it gets a little murky. Unfortunately, we didn't get enough in the campaign to see what she will actually do, partly because Trump himself never gave any real foreign policy specifics about what he's going to do, only criticized what happened in the past. So I think the foreign policy will become a part of her agenda in the first 100 days. Unfortunately, we don't know how. But the left in the Senate will push her, particularly on domestic policy issues like comprehensive immigration reform and minimum wage increases.
A thought for both of you. Does this prove actually the American system needs more power or more opportunity for independence? I mean, the demographics are changing, for instance. Where's a Latino voice? You know, where's an immigrant voice or something like that? Do you think it's maybe in 4 years' time we're going to be a population will be still fed up with this traditional left, traditional right, and there's no other choice?
I think that generally, I would agree with that. But I think even this year's campaign on both sides, both parties, has shown that although people are fed up with both political parties, in the end, Bernie Sanders, who is an independent senator, ran as a Democrat. Trump, who was previously a Democrat, ran as a Republican. That is to say, there is a belief...
They had to join the political
You have
club.
to have the big brands to be taken seriously.
Do you think that will never change? Or there's no sign of change now?
I think what normally happens, I think, in American politics is not that necessarily a third party emerges, but one of the two main parties swallows
Pivots a bit.
pivots a little bit towards whatever's out there and swallows it up and broadens its coalition somewhat, such that the two parties look the same in terms of what they're called, but actually are very different internally in terms of the coalitions which govern them. So they're likely to be able to probably swallow up quite big chunks of the independent platforms, which is effectively what's happened to Bernie Sanders.
Daniel, do you think the two-party system is intact and has this ability, chameleon-like, to change as it needs to?
I believe so. And I think the two-party system is flexible enough and malleable enough to deal with the changes within America. The question is, I think, at what point, what we learned from Trump, I think, and what we learned from Bernie Sanders is the importance of local politics. That I think for a long time, we put the emphasis on national politics, who's going to win the presidency, when actually the power, we should be looking at who's winning in the state legislatures, who's winning at the local level, and can you act on your promise on the local level. So that's where I think the changes need to be made, not necessarily with the third party.
But Trump didn't prove himself at a local, he didn't prove himself at any level. He proved himself to be a guy who can build a few hotels and golf courses and host a TV show.
But I think he talked to local constituencies. I think his notion of trade, which is a little off from the traditional Republican platform, I think, is what resonated with a lot of his voters. This is not politics as usual. And this is not quite what you would hear from national party leaders, but this is what I think local constituencies wanted to hear.
What do you think the global impression of this has left? The political system in America, a beacon of democracy. Maybe it's not a beacon of democracy anymore. But do you think the brand of American democracy has been damaged over this last 18 months?
Allies around the world of the United States, and America has more allies than any other power, look at the United States to see what kind of leadership is this country offering, both in terms of direct political leadership, but also soft power. That is, how attractive a society is it? How do people want to emulate it or not, or are alienated by it?
And it's been farcical, hasn't it?
This has been damaged. For many people, Americans and others, it's quite an embarrassment what has been going on. But I think what's going on in the domestic level is only a much heightened version of what is going on internationally as well, because the American project has been a global project since the Second World War. What happened with Brexit and the crisis of Europe, what's happening in the Middle East, and how that refugee crisis has ended up in the heart of Europe with terror and refugees and asylum seekers and so on. They're part of the crisis of the American global order as well. So it's a really dangerous time, actually, I think. But it's also an opportunity. I think it's a very important time where large numbers of things which were taken for granted as never really going badly wrong are going badly wrong at home and abroad. It's a time to actually for some fresh thinking and fresh ideas about how to reorient American power at home and abroad.
Well, that's where we'll leave our conversation for today. Indrajit Palmer and Daniel Cato, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
We end with our Insight Bite. This is a little something that we feel you should know. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking that when Americans go to the polls to vote for their country's next president, that's all there is to it. In fact, citizens in the US vote on a range of issues when they cast their vote. Ballot measures or propositions operate like referenda, are a form of direct democracy. This election season, Americans will vote on everything from changes to local tax law, the death penalty, even legislation around marijuana. And that's all for now. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.
Music, film, photography, fashion, design. The world of art and culture here on TRT World. Showcase brings you the latest from around the world, guides you behind the scenes and talks to the movers and shakers. Informative, fascinating and surprising. That's Showcase every day on TRT World.
US voters go to the polls in one of the most bitter and divisive presidential elections in living memory.
I'm Yolo Abdavid, live in New York at the Hillary Clinton campaign headquarters on Election Day.
Hello there, welcome to TRT World from London. I'm Shuli Ghosh. Also coming up on the programme. Entirely liberated, Peshmerga forces say they've recaptured a key town on the outskirts of Mosul. Turkey says it has a deal with the United States to prevent the YPG from entering Raqqa. And that sinking feeling, a large section of road in Japan is swallowed whole. US voters are heading to the polls to choose a new president after perhaps the most bitterly fought campaign in a generation. Both candidates are now in New York after wrapping up their campaigns. Hillary Clinton has already cast her vote with her husband Bill in the town of Chappaqua, where they live.
It is the most humbling feeling, Dan, because, I know how much responsibility goes with this, and so many people are counting on the outcome of this election, what it means for our country, and I'll do the very best I can if I'm fortunate enough to win today.
I'm very excited. It's a great opportunity. There's tremendous enthusiasm from everybody. You see it all over the country, all over the world. It's been a great feeling.
Donald Trump casting his vote in the past hour there in Manhattan. Let's join Yolo Abdavid, who's inside Hillary Clinton's campaign headquarters in New York. And tell us what's been happening there, Yolo. What's the mood in Clinton's camp?
It's definitely getting busier. I think that from the reports that we hear, that Hillary Clinton is actually at home at the moment in Chappaqua. As you pointed out, she came out early to vote. This has been part of her message for the last few days, to encourage people to be positive after such an acrimonious campaign, especially the last month or so. So she's trying to put out that message that people need to be positive, to encourage people to go out and vote. We hear that polling stations are quite busy. We've been told in other states it's very busy indeed. There's been that record number of people, over 200 million Americans who've registered to vote. So we'll see how much people will vote. But in terms of the Clinton campaign, they've gone as far as they can. We've had a blizzard of emails for most of the media, the world media here, the American media behind me, again reminding people the importance of voting. So I think the underlying message there, Julie, is that they really want people to go out, especially the African American, especially the Hispanic vote, especially people in urban areas. This is where the Democrat vote traditionally is stronger, and of course we are in normally a Democratic state here in New York.
Indeed, yes, strongly Democratic, but nevertheless, it's also Donald Trump's home, and he's cast his vote in the last hour. I suppose for both the candidates now, it's just the final tense wait after 18 months of a very roller coaster campaign.
It's going to be an agonizing wait, because this is a hugely important day for New York, no question about that. And even though really we haven't seen a lot of that campaign fever in New York State that we have seen in New Hampshire, in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and the very busy day with both candidates zooming around those swing states where it's supposedly very, very close between both of them. But here, now in central New York on a beautiful, sunny, blue sky day, then we'll have Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump within a mile of each other, just a couple of kilometers away from each other on either side of Times Square. It's a day for New Yorkers. It's because two New Yorkers are trying to become the President of the United States, and that in itself is quite important. But of course, it's not just about the presidency. It's not just about being commander-in-chief of the armed forces. It's not just about the White House. There are other elections, very important elections, for the Democrats and for the Republicans in many, many states. And there are between 7 and 8 states where the race for the Senate is also very important, because whoever controls the White House is one thing, but who controls the House of Representatives and who controls the Senate is quite another matter in terms of passing new laws and basically delivering on the manifesto that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have been talking about for so long.
Yolo, thank you for that. Yolo Abdafith in New York there. Well, let's go to TRT World's Simon McGregor-Wood, who's in Washington, D.C. And Simon, just give us a flavour of what the expectations are for turnout, because, of course, you know, one thing that's been obvious about this campaign is that many people have been fed up with the nastiness of it.
Yeah, not particularly keen on either of the candidates. That's also been a problem. Neither have been attractive to the neutral voter, but the indications are, and it's not very scientific, but it is something to go on, that the turnout is high. I'm in Washington looking at all these network feeds coming in from different states, and everyone is reporting long lines outside most polling stations. The weather is good across the United States. That always helps get people out as well. And here's one scientific fact. We've got, of those registered to vote, 46 million have already cast their votes in a variety of states across the country. That's a big turnout of early voters. In 2012, it was only 32.3 million. So it looks like people are, despite being, you know, annoyed and relieved that this whole process has come to an end, they are enthusiastic and they are getting their vote out. And both candidates, for various reasons, need high turnout. Trump needs a surge of white working-class voters who've bought into his message of change, an anti-Washington message. And Hillary, we've said it many times, desperately needs a big turnout of Latinos, black American voters, and young millennials.
And just give us a flavour of the nuts and bolts of how this is going to go, how long the polling stations stay open for, and when we can expect the first results, and possibly when we can call it for the next president.
Well, based on the previous election cycles of 2008, 2012, we've known who has won sometime between 11 p.m. Eastern Time and midnight. 2008, 2012, both the Republican losers made their concession speech just after midnight. The results, the first ones, come in from any time from 6 p.m., 7 p.m. You get big states like Florida, that knife-edge battleground that both desperately want to win. Results from there. 8 p.m. Pennsylvania, where we saw some pretty frantic campaigning from Hillary. Key state for her to retain. So I guess on the basis of recent experience, anytime between 11 and midnight Eastern Time, we'll know who's won.
OK, Simon, thank you very much indeed for that. Iraq's military command says the Kurdish Peshmerga have fully retaken the town of Bashika, just northeast of Mosul. Now they're searching buildings for Daesh terrorists and clearing booby traps. The ground assault to recapture the town was launched on Monday, backed by US airstrikes. It's part of a larger operation to retake Mosul, Daesh's stronghold in Iraq. Meanwhile, Iraqis fleeing Mosul have spoken of their final days before their escape.
10 days we have been living under airstrikes for 10 days. We could not escape. All directions were blocked. The army would shell the Daesh militants in the area. Then when the army captured the town, Daesh began retaliating.
The situation was tragic. It was bad. There was no food, no water, and airstrikes targeted us.
Well, TRT World's Nicole Johnston is in Bashika and sent this report.
After a day and a night of fighting, the Peshmerga forces have retaken the town of Bashika. Now, this was a largely Yazidi town. There are also Christians and Shabak living here, but now it's mostly deserted. All of the civilians left, which is at least one thing that made it a bit easier for the Peshmerga forces to come in here and battle Daesh. You can see now the big task is trying to clear this city, to clean it. There are improvised explosive devices. The town's been booby-trapped. Daesh had 2 years to prepare for this battle, but it was all over in one day. Now the next mission for the Peshmerga forces will be to capture any other remaining villages or towns still held by Daesh, but largely the forces say that they have completed capturing most of the areas that they wanted to. They'll now maintain their line of control and allow Iraqi forces to move deeper into Mosul and continue that battle.
The US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces are making progress in taking back the northern city of Raqqa. The SDF says it's captured 11 villages and rural areas north of Daesh's stronghold in Syria. Turkey has been opposed to this offensive on Raqqa because the majority of the fighters are from the YPG, which is the Syrian branch of the PKK terror group. US and Turkish military leaders held talks on the issue in Ankara on Sunday and agreed to develop a longer-term plan for seizing and governing Raqqa. Well, TRT World's Edis Tianshan is in Gaziantep. He says the Syrian regime is using air power to its advantage in driving rebels out of eastern Aleppo.
The fighting between the Syrian regime and the rebel groups continue unabated, particularly in the city of Aleppo, where the regime forces are keen on taking the entire city from the rebel groups, who are now under the siege of the regime for many months. And as they attempt to break the siege, in the latest round of fighting, we understand that they had actually lost further ground. According to a footage released by the regime-owned media, we understand that the district of so-called 1,070 apartments is now back in the hands of the regime forces, as the latest attempt by the rebel groups to break the siege has been foiled and they've lost further ground. And we also understand that the Syrian regime continues to deploy its leverage of aerial power in many parts of the country. One of the latest attacks came in the northern Idlib province, where at least 7 children and 2 pregnant women were killed in airstrikes carried out by the regime targeting residential areas. And we've also seen further airstrikes just outside of Damascus, the capital, which is a stronghold of the regime, but it's been surrounded by areas that are still controlled by rebels that are now consistently under the regime attacks, especially airstrikes, and at least 11 civilians were killed in particularly the eastern Ghouta suburb of Damascus, as dozens more were also injured.
Stay with us here on TRT World as we continue our coverage of the US elections. We'll take a look at the impact the movement had on the campaign. And the more it eats, the bigger it grows. An expanding sinkhole swallows a 4-lane intersection in southern Japan.
There's something beyond the game. It's a feeling. The excitement, the happiness of victory, or the despair of defeat.
But it's not just about winning or losing, it's the stories behind the competition.
It's not just the score, it's what the results mean.
The world is just a click away. Get the latest news from around the globe with fast and accurate coverage at trtworld.com.
Welcome back to TRT World. Let's remind you of our top stories. Polls have opened in the US presidential election. The two candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, have both cast their ballots in New York. On Monday, they had their last opportunity to appeal to voters.
We're hours away from a once-in-a-lifetime change. We're going to have real change, not Obama change.
A choice between division or unity, between an economy that works for everyone or only those at the top.
Well, let's get more on that now. We've got correspondents right across the US. On the West Coast, we have Randolph Nogel in San Francisco. Steve Mort is in Miami, in the key battleground of Florida. But first, let's go to another swing state, Virginia, and Kate Fisher, who's in Arlington for us. And Kate, Virginia, of course, important for both candidates. What have voters been telling you there?
Well, it's been a really busy morning here at this polling station. There's a queue forming behind me, in fact. There's already been more than 1,000 people through this door, and there are over 3,000 registered voters here. But already at midday here in Virginia, almost we're at 60% turnout, which is what we had in 2012 after a full day of voting. So they are hoping for even more people to come and vote today. Voters here in this precinct tend to be more democratic, so most of the people I've spoken to are voting for Hillary Clinton, but they say they are very anxious about the result. Those I've found who are voting for Trump say the reason being that they are simply fed up of the Clintons. And I had an interesting conversation with one lady who told me that this is the first time in 50 years that she's decided not to vote for the presidency. She said she simply could not bring herself to be comfortable with either candidate. Another nice thing about the voting here is a lot of people have been bringing their children along, and there's even stickers for those future voters. They can't have a vote yet, but they can be involved in the democratic process.
Great idea. Thank you very much indeed for that. Let's go to Florida, the biggest swing state, of course, and Steve Mort joins us now from Miami. So, Steve, just tell us about the battle for Florida and why it's so important.
Yes, about 6.5 million people early voted in this state, and it's so important because there are so many electoral votes up for grabs. 29 electoral votes out of the 270 that the winner will need are up for grabs here. And it's very important, Florida, because it could be a pivot state. It could be the state that hands a victory to either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. And we saw some extremely high numbers in early turnout over the last few days, particularly amongst Latinos. 23% of this state's population is Hispanic, and we've seen very high turnouts here in Miami and just to the north in Fort Lauderdale. And these are areas that Hillary Clinton is going to want to do well. If she's not up by at least about 20 percentage points here in Miami and the surrounding area, then it's going to be a good night for Donald Trump. Donald Trump himself is going to want to do well in northern parts of the state. That's the more rural, whiter, working class areas, the areas that he's been targeting hard over the last few weeks, the large city of Jacksonville as well. If he's not doing well in those areas when vote tallies start to come in, then it could be a good night for Hillary Clinton. But the polls have shown a razor-thin margin for Hillary Clinton, about 1 percentage point, 46 to 45. The Democrats have had an early vote advantage. We saw huge early vote turnout here in Miami, and the Clinton campaign is taking some comfort from that.
Yeah, it is a knife edge, though. Steve, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, Hillary Clinton has struggled to attract the youth vote. Randolph Nogle is in San Francisco for us. And Randolph, why is it that Hillary hasn't managed to capitalise on the young vote in the same way her Democrat rival Bernie Sanders did?
That's right. I mean, Hillary Clinton has really struggled, as you mentioned, with the youth vote. And I think that's because during the Democratic primaries, a lot of youth voters were really behind Bernie Sanders. We're in San Francisco, where voting has just really started in the last hour on the West Coast. And voters we've spoken to do sort of hint at this enthusiasm gap. Many people are being driven to the polls. Many youth voters are being driven to the polls by the possibility of a Trump candidacy. Also, there's this talk of a hidden Trump vote. Trump voters that would maybe not admit to a pollster or even their families that they would vote for Trump, but in the confines of the ballot box, that's exactly what they'll do. So we'll have to see whether this enthusiasm gap for Hillary Clinton is counteracted by the fear of a Trump presidency by Democratic young voters.
Randolph, thank you. Randolph Nogle in San Francisco there. Well, way back at the beginning of her campaign for the White House, Hillary Clinton criticised many of Donald Trump's supporters, denouncing what she called the alt-right. It was a movement few people had heard of before, but now those who subscribe to it boast that they're taking over the Republican Party. And as Matthew Symington reports, its ideas and methods often provoke outrage.
If there's one movement that has shaken America's political system more than any other this election cycle, it's the alt-right. So what is it? Well, the answer to that question depends on who you ask. Take Hillary Clinton.
Anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, anti-women, all key tenets making up the emerging racist ideology known as the alt-right.
Or Milo Yiannopoulos, tech editor of the right-wing website Breitbart and poster boy for the alt-right movement.
It cares about Western values. It cares about liberal, capitalist, Western democracy, democratic values, freedom, equality, that kind of thing. And it sees, various threats to those on various fronts.
The movement exists mostly online, on websites like 4chan and Reddit forums. It's predominantly male, young, and it loves to cause outrage. The alt-right's followers are experts at internet trolling, targeting what they call cultural Marxism, including political correctness and social justice campaigners. And this is the crux of what the alt-right is about. The movement's supporters say they're defending Western values. Their critics say they're defending white, male supremacy.
Let's go. Let's go.
These fault lines are often exposed over cultural issues like the new Ghostbusters movie. It was an all-female cast, and when the trailer was released, it provoked a storm of criticism on the internet. And people didn't hold back about why they thought it was so bad. As the row over Ghostbusters heated up, many Twitter users rounded on black actress Leslie Jones, directing a stream of racist abuse towards her. Milo Yiannopoulos was accused of fanning the flames and banned from Twitter. He says the site has an anti-conservative bias. In terms of policy, the alt-right movement is clear on some issues. It's anti-immigration, anti-globalization, and anti-foreign intervention. And that means supporters fall firmly within the Trump camp.
How much are you being paid? $1,500?
But whoever wins the election, this is a movement that's growing in scale and force. And we'll be hearing plenty more from it. Matthew Symington, TRT World.
And, of course, we'll bring you special coverage 100 GMT. Be sure to watch to find out who will be the next President of the United States. Now, the European Union has expressed concern over recent developments in Turkey, urging Ankara to uphold democratic standards. The EU's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, called on Turkey to resume political dialogue with opposition groups. The 28-member bloc has also condemned the attempted coup in July. It emphasised the need for the rule of law and the protection of human rights. TRT World's Hassan Abdullah has more on Turkey's reaction to those EU concerns about democracy.
An official at the Turkish Foreign Ministry has called these comments misplaced. He said that those issuing such statements leave the impression that they're either unaware of political realities and processes or choose to claim for themselves moral high ground based on arrogant colonial attitude. He's also said that perhaps some Western governments should try and allow Daesh or other terrorist sympathizers into their parliaments and then protect their democratic rights. We also have a statement from the Turkish presidency, and it says that Turkey expects respect for its democracy and political processes made by the democratically elected government. We also expect support for our fight against terrorist groups. The negative statements we receive from our European allies during this crucial time are misplaced, a matter of concern, and could affect the alliance between Turkey and the European Union.
Lawyers in Hong Kong are holding a silent protest against Beijing's decision to ban 2 elected lawmakers from taking office. Dressed in black, local and foreign lawyers walked from the High Court to the Court of Final Appeal. The march took place a day after the Chinese Parliament banned the pro-independence lawmakers from the Legislative Council. They had carried a banner that read "Hong Kong is not China" during their swearing-in ceremony in October.
I believe the majority of the Hong Kong people support us protesting in a peaceful and orderly way. Maybe a big one, maybe a small one, but still, most people want it to be peaceful and orderly. Every day we turn on the television screen, we see these very violent clashes in Europe, in the Middle East, in America. But here, it's very peaceful, and we want to preserve that. But then we tell Beijing, don't think because we're so peaceful, then you can trample on us like that. And so I certainly hope that the Hong Kong people will exercise restraint and conduct our protests in a peaceful way.
More than 20,000 people have been arrested in the Philippines since President Rodrigo Duterte launched his war against drugs and crime. That means living conditions in prisons are worse than ever before. But as Nafisa Latic reports, many inmates don't want to leave.
These inmates need to take turns to sleep. This is the Quezon City prison in Manila. It was built 60 years ago for 800 people. Now it's home to more than 3,000 inmates, many of them arrested during Duterte's war on drugs. But despite the overcrowding, some prisoners are happy to stay where they are.
I feel much safer here than outside, because all of the people involved in drugs are being killed outside.
The problem is there is no room for all of them. They sleep on the concrete floor of the basket court if they manage to find an empty place. Each toilet here is shared by 150 people.
Inmates get sick because they don't get to sleep comfortably at night. Those other inmates who can't be accommodated inside cell, they just sleep here in the courtyard of the facility.
Most of the inmates can leave if they post bail, but these people are too poor and too scared to go back on the streets. Nearly 2,300 drug users and dealers have been killed since the crackdown started. After President Rodrigo Duterte took an office in June, he urged people to kill drug addicts and dealers and announced a war on drugs, particularly a cheap form of crystal meth called shabu, the most popular drug in the country.
We shall not be cowed. We must redouble our efforts to concentrate on intelligence gathering, prevention, interdiction, arrest and prosecution.
Human rights groups and Western governments have criticized the drug campaign, but it's been popular in the Philippines. It's even prompted many drug users to turn themselves in, even though prisons like the one in Quezon City has ran out of room. Nafisa Latic, TRT World.
A sinkhole in southern Japan has swallowed an entire 4-lane intersection in the city of Fukuoka. The hole is about 15 meters deep, and authorities are worried buildings on either side could collapse. City officials are now working to prevent it from growing further and have ordered people to evacuate the area. That's it from us for now. Your headlines are coming up next.
Beşten büyüktür.
From Wall Street to Main Street and the people in power, money talks, and so do we. Corruption, technology, jobs, if it affects you, it affects us. We have reports from around the world and hear from the people in the know to make financial news your business. Wherever there's money, there's a story. Join me, Matthew Moore, for Money Talks on TRT World.
Hello there, you're watching TRT World. I'm Shuli Ghosh. A reminder of our main stories now. Voters in the US are casting their ballots in the presidential election after perhaps the most bitterly fought contest in a generation. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have voted after wrapping up their campaigns in North Carolina and Michigan.
We're excited. It's a great opportunity. There's tremendous enthusiasm from everybody. You see it all over the country, all over the world. It's been a great feeling.
It is the most humbling feeling, Dan, because, I know how much responsibility goes with this, and so many people are counting on the outcome of this election, what it means for our country, and I'll do the very best I can if I'm fortunate enough to win today.
Iraq's military command says the Kurdish Peshmerga have fully retaken the town of Bashika, just northeast of Mosul. They're now searching buildings for Daesh fighters and clearing booby traps. The ground assault to recapture the town was launched on Monday, backed by US airstrikes. It's part of a larger operation to retake Mosul, Daesh's stronghold in Iraq. Meanwhile, Iraqis fleeing Mosul have spoken of their final days before their escape.
10 days we have been living under airstrikes for 10 days. We could not escape. All directions were blocked. The army would shell the Daesh militants in the area. Then when the army captured the town, Daesh began retaliating.
That's how we
The situation was tragic. It was bad. There was no food, no water, and airstrikes targeted us.
In Syria, airstrikes have killed at least 7 children and 2 pregnant women in Idlib province. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the strikes targeted the rebel-held town of Khan Shaykhun. It's still unknown 2 elected lawmakers from taking office. Dressed in black, local and foreign lawyers walked from the High Court to the Court of Final Appeal. The march took place a day after the Chinese parliament banned the pro-independence lawmakers from the Legislative Council. It carried a banner that read "Hong Kong is not China" during their swearing-in ceremony back in October. Those are the main stories here on TRT World. The news continues after Money Talks.
We are currently driving towards the incident.
We're reporting to you from the very heart of the story.
The cause of the explosion is unclear.
Smoke and debris. We do now have unconfirmed reports.
The number of casualties is rising as we speak. Here on the ground, there's a lot of commotion. Some of the eyewitnesses.
There's been a social
People are taking to social media outlets to discuss.
Reports of the explosion are now spreading like wildfire. People are clearly shaken by what has been a horrific incident.
It's a choice between an economy that works for everyone, not just those at the top.
Our jobs are being stolen like candy from a baby. Not going to happen anymore, folks. There are going to be consequences.
Well, this is it. Election day in the United States. Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. We're live across the country from the east to the west. In New York, our reporters keeping an eye on the stock markets. Which candidate is Wall Street rooting for? In Iowa, a swing state that could be very important tonight, we're meeting ordinary voters as they head to the polls. And in the west, we're in San Francisco finding out how immigrants have powered the US tech industry for years. Hello, I'm Matthew Moore, and you are watching a special edition of Money Talks. So here it is finally, Election Day in the United States. Millions of Americans are voting after being canvassed for a year and a half by Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton and others who have collectively spent billions of dollars trying to win their support. Now, barring any unforeseen events, we should have a winner by Wednesday. Throughout this show, I'll be joined by our agitator-in-chief, Craig Capitas. He'll be guiding us through the economics, politics and absurdities of the entire election process. Craig, are you excited? You've seen a lot of these elections.
We're into day 593 of this campaign. Are we done yet?
Well, how many Americans won't be voting? How many are going to just sit on the couch and watch it?
Well, the estimates range from anywhere from 40 to 60 million. Now, very briefly, in 1972, 61.3% of the Americans voted.
Right.
Back in 1884, 75%. Those are the all-time highs. So,
well, we'll see.
This could be higher.
We've got a couple of days and we'll soon find out. OK, let's get to our first report now. We're going to Iowa, a swing state where the Republican candidate is expected to do well, but a Democrat surge is not out of the question. Our senior business producer, Azar Sukri, is in the heart of that city in Des Moines. Here's his package.
A strong turnout in Des Moines, the state capital of Iowa. Up to the start of voting, all indications had been that Republican candidate Donald Trump would win comfortably. So what is it about his message that's resonating with voters here?
Jobs, definitely for Americans, and bringing some of our manufacturing jobs back home, as well as very, very concerned about where we go with minimum wage.
But even though the latest opinion polls before voting began showed Trump with a strong lead, several said they voted for his Democratic rival, Hillary Clinton.
I definitely don't trust Trump to negotiate trade treaties, and I think Hillary will hopefully get us better deals all around.
I think she would be the best for everyone. Not only, the other races, but blacks, whites, whatever, I think she'd be the best for them.
I want to see change, period. I want to see civil discourse from both sides, and I want to see honesty. But most importantly, I want to see more jobs. I want to see Americans being able to feed their families. I don't want to see more problems with Obamacare or more regulations from the EPA here in Iowa with farmers. They know what they're doing. I want to see more control put locally.
Trump has been driving home his plan to cut taxes and get tough on American companies that move jobs and profits overseas. Iowa's unemployment rate is below the national average, but wages have not grown as quickly as the rest of the country. Trump's candidacy has fired up the mostly white, rural, blue-collar communities of Iowa. But the Democrats won 6 of the last 10 elections in this state. In this close race, Iowa could play a pivotal role.
Get out there and vote.
Azhar Sukri, TRT World, Des Moines, Iowa.
And Azhar joins us live now. Azhar, you mentioned Trump wants to bring jobs back to America. How does he plan to do that? And do people there take his pledge seriously?
Hello, Matt, from Des Moines in Iowa. Yes, it is a beautifully sunny day. Before I answer your question, I have to say that voter turnout here, apparently, according to a couple of the officials that we've spoken to, has been very high. So, yes, that message that Trump has been putting out throughout his campaign resonating very strongly in this part of America. Some of the measures that he's talked about back in June, he outlined a 7-point plan to bring American jobs back to America. I have to point out, of course, that yes, America has lost a lot of jobs overseas, but it has also created a lot of jobs internally. Over the years, and even since 2008, job growth has actually been pretty strong. But going back to his plan, he's been talking about things like renegotiating the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and then, of course, getting really tough on China in so many ways, calling it a currency manipulator and things like that. All of those messages resonating, as I said in the package there, with this largely white, blue-collar, rural and suburban area of America.
Azhar, let's just turn to Clinton for a moment. She does keep talking about an economy that works for everyone, not just the people at the top. Words you'd expect from a Democrat, perhaps. But at the same time, she's been giving these secret speeches to Goldman Sachs for huge sums of money, cozying up to Wall Street. How does the Clinton campaign justify this?
Well, Hillary Clinton, as early as October, just in October, said that about 90% of the money that has been received by the Clinton Foundation, for example, goes to charitable organizations. But for the most part, that issue has been something that she has sidestepped. Of course, Trump has been hammering her on that issue, but also on things like the email issue, her use of a private email server. These issues have really been at the heart of this campaign, which we are now at the end of, and we are now on voting day here in the United States in Iowa.
Azhar Sukri, thank you very much for your work all this week. Appreciate it. Now let's go to our editor-at-large, Craig Kapitas. Now, Iowa is a swing state, Craig, so it's regarded as quite an important trophy for these candidates. What happens if to everybody in the non-swing states, where it's all settled pretty much?
People don't pay any attention to them. You take a state like Louisiana, which is a Republican state. There is no Clinton campaign down there. There's not even an office. So if someone there has a question or has a problem that needs to be sorted out with voter registration or whatever, there's no one there to turn to because they conceded that.
Your son.
Well, yeah, what happened to my son is a student at Tulane University. He registered to vote. There was some kind of problem. He went to contact the Clinton campaign to see if they could send people in to fix it. He couldn't reach anyone. Now, if that had happened to him in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, or Florida, a swing state, there would have been 15 guys over at Tulane University in 10 minutes and sorted this out.
Okay.
So the question is, is the system rigged? Well, it depends how
or
you
is it just pragmatic?
Yeah.
All right, Craig, we're going to come back to you in a minute. But for a moment, let's take a quick break from the elections and take a look at some of the day's top business stories in 60 seconds. South Korean prosecutors have raided Samsung's offices as part of a probe into the nation's political scandal. The investigation is looking at whether Samsung gave $3.1 million to Choi Soon-sil, a friend of the country's president Park Geun-hye, to fund her daughter's sporting activities. Britain's Marks & Spencer says it will shut around 30 stores at home and 53 stores abroad as it attempts to revive its struggling business. The company aims to focus more on food, and retailers' shares have dipped 22% so far this year, while profits have crashed 88% compared to a year ago. And Iran has sealed its first major international energy deal since sanctions were lifted earlier this year. Iran's national oil company has signed a preliminary $6 billion deal with France's Total and China's CNPC to help develop a giant gas field in the Gulf. Well, let's take a look at how Wall Street is seeing these elections now. The S&P and the Dow are up about 0.5%. The Nasdaq is up about 1 full percentage point there. Well, on Monday, the last full trading session before the election, the major US indices all closed up about 2%. Now, stocks had been falling for at least 9 days leading up to this election, all the uncertainty. So what's inspired the latest rally? Mobeen Nasir takes a look in this report.
Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump? Voters in America may be divided, but investors have a clear favorite. US markets spiked on the final day of trade before the presidential elections. That's because the latest polls suggest Hillary Clinton will win. Yet there's no consensus she'll be better for business than her billionaire rival. In fact, it's the Republican candidate who's promising to lower taxes that should boost profits for companies. And Hillary's support for renewables could drive down oil prices, while Trump's anti-Iran rhetoric may take them the other way. And both candidates plan tougher regulations for big pharmaceutical companies and the banks. How their policies affect Wall Street will only be known once the new president takes office. So what have the candidates said that makes smart money prefer one over the other?
That I will exercise the greatest care and responsibility in all of the powers invested in the office of the presidency.
When we win on November 8th, we are going to drain the swamp.
Investors hate uncertainty, and Hillary Clinton seems to be the more predictable candidate. But the dust over America's economic future won't settle with the outcome of this election.
No matter who wins the White House, the Senate is likely to remain quite split.
Stocks had been tumbling for days leading up to the elections. Tuesday's cautious recovery shows nobody's willing to put money on the outcome just yet. Mobeen Nasir, TRT World.
Well, we have our reporter Yolo Abdafid in New York keeping an eye on exactly this subject. Yolo, take it away for us.
Well, I was on Wall Street on Monday, and yes, the rally was there for some of the markets and after some 9 days of uncertainty. But I'm not the expert on this. Let's talk to a real expert, which is Max Wolf from at 55 Capital, a market strategist. Now then, does that rally mean that you guys in the money markets, you see this slightly different even before or as people are voting now?
Absolutely. So we've been very nervous about two things. One, not knowing who's going to win, and two, not knowing what happens in this election. So unusual for us to not know what happens with the election. Usual, we don't know who wins before they win, but we usually have a pretty much blind and bottomless faith that it'll be a smooth and pretty easy transition, and that faith has been rattled. So we're worried about two things, and we don't like not knowing one thing, let alone two things. Two things to worry about made 9 days down, a little bit less to worry about made 300 points up.
So that was part of the reason for the rally. Now then, if Clinton does win, and some people seem to suggest that the Electoral College at least seems to favor her, then won't the money markets and you guys dealing with money, won't you be worried because she is talking about raising taxes, she is talking about putting more burden on big business.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, there's a lot of things to worry about. One is whether or not the person will do what they say, and the other thing is what they say. So everyone in the market sees the Clinton presidency, a likely Clinton presidency, as a continuation of the Obama presidency, which was unbelievably good times for Wall Street. It was happy times for folks who run money and happier times for folks whose money they run. So it was not a disaster. Also, we don't like not knowing. So while some of the things that Trump said were more potentially exciting to investors about lower taxes or regulation, there was no track record to bank on. And President Trump would be a president who was never a mayor or a governor or a senator or a representative. So it'd really be all de novo, starting from zero, and we don't like that.
And that's despite Donald Trump saying all along, look, this is going to be great for America if I become the next president because I'm going to lower taxes, I'm going to increase the amount of jobs that come in. And you're saying that actually what? The money markets don't believe him.
Yeah, well, there's no real reason for us to believe him, right? So we love the idea, but he's never done it before. He's never been a politician before. And quite frankly, every candidate thinks they're the best. If you don't have a big ego, you don't go into that business. And if you don't say you're going to make things better, then nobody shows up at your rallies. So everyone says they're going to do jobs. Everybody says they're going to do a great job. Certainly, he wasn't shy in that area. But if we bet on everyone being 100% truthful in everything they say, we'd be fired and we'd deserve it.
Max Wolf, thank you very much indeed. Max Wolf, a market strategist. So obviously, confidence, I think, rising because they think that Hillary Clinton will be the next president. Matt.
Okay, Yolo in New York, thank you very much. Now we are back with our editor-at-large, Craig Kapitas. Craig, I have a little riddle for you. What does Donald Trump have in common with Grexit, Brexit and terrorism? Think back to earlier this year when he was compared to some of those.
All three people involved in those incidents wear wigs?
No, the Economist Intelligence Unit ranked Donald Trump right up there with all those global threats to the global economy. And I have to ask you, why would they put him up there with all those sort of things when he's a billionaire, he's a successful businessman? Why is he a so-called threat to the global economy?
Someone who people don't understand is always a threat. And that's why Donald Trump is a threat. You can't overestimate the importance of Trump being the first outsider of the political system in American history to actually make this kind of an impact. As he would say, this is huge.
Huge.
Just the fact that he's there. And what worries people is that he is not acting on this in a manner that befits the office. I mean, this morning he was complaining that if he doesn't win, he felt that he would have been a waste of his time and a loss of money.
And he's always going on about the election being rigged.
An effort where frankly, if you are nominated to be a candidate for President of the United States, sorry, Donaldo, this is a great honor. And you should treat it as such.
Okay, so you're saying you should play the political game, and he's saying no.
Well, no, it's not a political game, Matthew. No, it's not a political game.
Okay.
If you are running for President of the United States of America, that is something special that's reserved for very few people in history. And it should be approached with a sort of serious and grace. There's no grace in Trump.
Okay.
That's really what it is.
All right. Okay, Craig, we're going to come back to you very soon, but first we're going to get some more market reaction, this time from Asia. Patrick Fox sent us this report from Singapore.
Well, if Wall Street's strong finish on Monday was an indication Hillary Clinton is winning the race to the White House, share activity in Asia may be an indication it'll be a tighter finish than many people expect, with markets around the region closing slightly mixed on Tuesday, although negative trade data out of China and a downbeat business survey by National Australia Bank put a dampener on sentiment as well. Sydney did nevertheless manage to eke out some small gains, with the ASX 200 closing 0.1% higher. Japan's Nikkei 225 ended down a fraction as the yen strengthened slightly against the greenback. Elsewhere, Chinese shares outperformed the region, with the Shanghai Composite adding close to 0.5%. Meantime, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index also rose about 0.5%. Investors there looking past the negative trade data and betting on a Clinton win. Also getting a check on South Korea's Kospi. It edged up around 0.25%. Samsung Electronics was in focus after its offices were raided as part of a probe into a scandal involving President Park Geun-hye. Its share price actually ended about 0.25% higher today, but could be in for a rough ride if the company is implicated in any way.
Okay. Now let's take a look at how the election is impacting tech companies. I'm joined live by Rich Jaroslavsky. He's from San Francisco. He is the Vice President for Content and Chief Journalist at the mobile app service Smart News. Rich, thank you for joining us on Money Talks once again on this very important day. What do all the smart people in Silicon Valley make of this election? Who do they want?
I think the vast majority of people in Silicon Valley want Clinton to win, even though Trump's economic policies or his tax policies might benefit them more personally. I think that when they look at the broader picture and look at the potential impact of a Trump presidency on their businesses, they're very afraid. And I think that with only a couple notable exceptions, people in the Valley are pulling for Clinton. What
are you talking about, Rich? I mean, are you talking about when Trump says he's going to bring jobs back from China to the United States, and it could affect companies like Apple, which use, Chinese workers to make their phones? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that's quite possible in terms of Trump's suspicion of free trade. But I think maybe even a bigger issue for Silicon Valley is Trump's approach to immigration. If Clinton gets elected, and particularly if she gets a Democratic Senate to work with, that does open at least a potential path to some sort of meaningful immigration reform, which has been a huge issue in Silicon Valley for years now. If Trump is elected, not only does it foreclose any chance of serious immigration reform, but it also probably makes the situation considerably worse, given Trump's suspicion of Muslims, given his endorsement of a major attempt to restrict immigration into the U.S. Silicon Valley is very concerned about attracting and keeping high-tech knowledge workers, people who are highly skilled, who are entrepreneurs from around the world. That's the lifeblood of Silicon Valley, and anything that threatens to choke that flow off is something that the Valley would be very, very concerned about.
Rich, I have a question for you from one of your old colleagues, a guy called Craig Capitas. You may remember him. Go for it, Craig.
I know him. Hey, Craig. Look, Rich, a question here. Immigration has been such an issue, whether it's legal, illegal, whatever. There's been a lot of talk that a lot of the Silicon Valley companies were founded by immigrants, like Google. Question is this: as you're looking 10, 20 years down the road in the tech world, do you see the developments in the United States happening in the United States or coming in from places like China, Europe, and elsewhere?
Well, the United States and Silicon Valley in particular, for it to thrive, it has to be a magnet. It has to draw the best and brightest from around the world. And that's really been the key to its success over the last 30 years, and it will be the key to its success over the next 30 years. There's a critical mass in Silicon Valley of high-tech companies, the educational infrastructure there, particularly around Stanford University, and venture capital. Anything that impedes the flow of capital, that impedes the flow of high-tech and highly skilled people is going to spell disaster for Silicon Valley in the long term.
Yeah, but in Silicon Valley, Rich, again, looking 10 years down the future, is it going to be past its sell-by date? Is there going to be a new Silicon Valley like in China, Italy, wherever, or is it always going to be Silicon Valley?
It'll always be Silicon Valley as long as the United States embraces the policies that made Silicon Valley great.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've had conversations with people from other countries who tell me, oh, we're going to replicate what Silicon Valley does. We're going to build Silicon Desert or Silicon something else, Silicon Beach. And somehow those things, by and large, have not come to pass. It's the policies of the United States and the critical mass of capital, education, and the high-tech companies that have made Silicon Valley great.
And of course, Stanford University, even though they don't have a good football team, right, Rich?
Pardon me?
And of course, Stanford University, even though they have a bad football team.
Well, it's not as good a football team.
All right, Rich
but
Jaroslavsky in
that's
San Francisco. Thank you so much for your analysis on that strange and petty aside. We are going to leave it. I'm just kidding.
Strange and petty? How dare you,
that
sir?
Just sums you up
Go
perfectly,
back to
Craig.
England. Go cover your soccer.
Now listen, Craig. No, look, we'll come back to you now. And you did bring to my attention this little clip from one campaign ago. Let's have a listen.
Yeah.
Obama. You got Obama phone?
Yes, everybody in Cleveland, low minority, got Obama phone. Keep Obama in president, you know. He gave us a phone.
He gave you a phone?
Do more.
How did he give you a phone?
You sign up if you on food stamps, you on Social Security, you got low income, you disability.
Craig, that was quite an arresting little clip there, but it does have a serious point to it. What
it
is
shows the two sides, that people who are disadvantaged in the United States get free stuff from the United States, which is a good thing if they're disadvantaged, people who are in poverty. But what you saw there was, unfortunately, a black woman, sadly, exhibiting the Obama phone, thus making that divide even worse, in my opinion. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, just today, for instance, the Department of Labor Statistics issued new stats that said that there's close to 10 million more new government workers in the United States than in the manufacturing side. So what that means is that people working for the government don't make anything except bureaucracy. And that bureaucracy feeds stuff like, I want an Obama phone. And it was very clear on that people were taking advantage of this. So again, this attempt to make things equitable, it's just poorly managed, and that's where you see the divide.
I guess what you're trying to say is the politicians are being cynical as always. Okay, well, Craig Peters, thank you very much. You're going to be with us the whole evening for the election, but from us on Money Talks, that is it. The race to the White House is now almost over, but it's been a long one, and it took quite a few ugly turns. Here are some of the highlights and the lowlights.
She lied when she said she didn't call it the gold standard in one of the debates. She totally lied.
So he goes around with crocodile tears about how terrible it is.
You were very much involved. Excuse me. My turn. She has tremendous hate in her heart. And when she said deplorables, she meant it. And when she said irredeemable, they're irredeemable.
You know, it's not okay to insult people. It's not okay.
There's something beyond the game. It's a feeling. The excitement, the happiness of victory, or the despair of defeat.
But it's not just about winning or losing. It's the stories behind the competition.
It's not just the score, it's what the results mean.
Excited to see the next technological breakthrough.
We landed on Mars.
Everyone should have the right to an education.
Less talking, more action.
A cure for cancer
is an issue that is very close to all.
Plus de respect pour everyone, man
Over my head is all I need. To end the war on terror. Extinguishing family poverty.
A better understanding of mental health.
Mejor comida en las escuelas para los Female president of the US.
To end the war on terror. A revolution.
Republican, Democrat, Black, White, Hispanic, businessman, veteran. Regardless of what labels Americans identify with, in a few days' time, 142 million registered voters will choose the next president of the United States. Over the last few weeks, TRT World correspondents have traveled across the country to try to understand why this is the most divisive presidential election in U.S. history. We've traveled south along the Mexican border to states both blue and red, Our correspondents have been up and down the East Coast, to the Sunshine State of Florida, and all the way west to California. We've asked Americans, and those not so American, about their vision for the next U.S. presidency. I'm Tatiana Anderson, and coming up, I'll share with you what voters across the country have been saying about this election. First stop, Detroit. Kilmeny Dukart traveled to the Rust Belt of the Northeast. Residents there told us why they think the candidates should give their city a second chance.
Detroit was once the economic envy of the world. The people of Detroit helped to power America to its position of global dominance in the 20th century. But for many living in this city, that dream has long ago vanished, while the factories and neighborhoods crumble.
This is Donald Trump's portrait of Detroit. Yes, the once thriving Motor City declared bankruptcy in 2013 and property values plummeted. But that's when investors and entrepreneurs started betting on Detroit again. Gail Kay was one of them.
People are coming here who couldn't afford to open a business anywhere in the world, and they open here and they do really, really well. Businesses are booming, and it's really because the people here are invested in our success.
And the illusion that the city's in hibernation is just that.
I think Donald Trump is speaking about the old Detroit. I think if he were smart, he'd be investing here. I think he'd be turning some of these buildings into hotels and other investments if he were a smart man.
I like just this spray painted.
Rosalind Karamoko is rebranding the city. Detroit is the new black.
The new black is sort of this universal pop culture phrase that really is referencing the new cool or the new hip. And, you know, Detroit is certainly that, but for some reason when you put Detroit in front of the new black, it takes on this other, you know, racial undertone. And I think these are some underlying issues within the city that really have to be addressed for the city to move forward in sort of a more unified way.
And she's turned it into a fashion label. The accent over the E, a nod to the city's French origins, while the new black references Detroit's racial history and current renaissance. This is part of what some call Detroit's Berlin Wall. It separates a predominantly affluent white community from a poor black one. And while investment in infrastructure pours into downtown, the challenge is for that wealth and those opportunities to come to communities like this one.
When you have a city that's coming back so rapidly, you are leaving other areas out of that equation, you know, outside of this 7.2 square miles in Detroit that everyone is focused on. But I do have faith that at some point, all this programming and these resources, that they would start to expand and open up program affiliates in the neighborhoods that can also benefit from small business training.
Karamoko says politicians aren't in tune with what's happening here. For her, Detroit is the American dream. It's an opportunity to build something strong, to get it right. A place for innovation. Kilmeny Dukart, TRT World, Detroit.
The American workforce is made up of people from every walk of life. Zaina Awad traveled south to the Mexican border where she met the undocumented, people who've long called this country home, but whose futures here lie in the hands of the next U.S. president.
We will begin working on an impenetrable, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful southern border wall.
Mexico is across the riverbank. Now, there are official border crossings, but they're not an option for undocumented migrants. They use open areas like this one. And for many, a better and safer life is just across the river.
Margarita made that journey 20 years ago to escape violence and joblessness in her native Mexico. She had one child at the time.
My first job was in a hotel. They paid me $5.15 an hour. Afterwards, I worked at a cleaner, where I brought my son with me, to be with me there the whole time. Little by little, I was getting ahead.
She now works at a fast food chain and has 6 children. She lives with the daily risk of deportation. And it's a risk that's constantly on the mind of her oldest American-born daughter, 16-year-old Yuritsi.
I would have to know what to do in those exact moments, and I really don't. I don't think I have the capability or the knowledge for that yet. I don't know what I would do. I don't know how I would be able to protect them.
Earlier this year, President Obama signed an executive order to give temporary protection to millions of undocumented migrants like Margarita and her Mexican-born son, Sheridan.
When I found out, I couldn't wait. I ran to his school and I told him, "Son, now you're going to be okay. You're going to have insurance to work. You're going to be able to..."
But Margarita's hopes were dashed when the Supreme Court blocked Obama's order in June. The border is guarded 24 hours a day, and some of the towns along it feel as Mexican as the real thing. John is the only non-Latino on his block.
I heard some noise. I went in the backyard. I found a couple of illegal aliens behind my landlord's cars. I made them say, "Y'all got to leave. Please get out here. You can't be in the property." They got scared and they ran. They took off running.
He doesn't agree with building a wall, but he thinks more needs to be done to control the flow of people.
Once they get over here, they don't. A lot of them just end up, getting on welfare, and it's BS, man. They don't try to hold their own, and then eventually they get caught and they get transported down back to Mexico.
But many remain. And it's what to do with the undocumented migrants that's become a deadlock in this election. It might be about winning votes for the running candidates, but for people like Margarita, it's about losing a home and the only family life they've ever known. Zaina Awad, TRT World, Texas.
Regardless of how you came to the U.S., healthcare remains one of the most controversial issues facing voters. Yellow Up David posed a simple question to 3 Americans: is healthcare a human right? But he didn't get a simple answer.
Under the Constitution.
So does the Constitution say how much we support it?
No, but the primary focus of the American government is to provide, the federal government is to provide for the national defense, not to provide health care. That's something that should be done locally, that is best done locally, and not central plans from DC.
Let me ask all 3 of you, start with you, Joe. Is it a basic human right to have health care? Is it or not? And
yes,
is it all about money and how much it costs?
Yeah, this is where the big flaw of the Obamacare program. Bernie was for health care for all. Health care as a right. Jill Stein is the same way. So this is where you started. It's not a product. It's a human right.
Okay,
and that's the fundamental difference.
Gail, is it, especially for the elderly, especially for young people, those who need it, is it a basic human right?
Well, it's interesting that you put it that way, because once we talk about rights, then we're talking about something that no one can argue against. I would talk about the right of choice, the right to be able to pick what products you want instead of being forced in an unconstitutional program that requires you to buy government sponsored health care that's inferior to what was in the marketplace before Obamacare was set up, or to pay a penalty. And that's the problem. Your son, who's living in your basement and being a musician, pursuing his creative interests, is on your insurance because Obamacare said that children could be on the insurance till age 26. But a lot of young people, they're going to foot the bill for this, because the benefits, I mean, you can declare anything a right, but somebody has to pay for it.
So what we come back to is this question of affordability. Eh?
Right, I think so. And I think that the more you get that pool larger, it's better. Let's be clear that people were against Social Security when it started as well. In Medicare, they said this big government program will never work. And now if you talk about that politically, and I do politics, not policy, people would we do the commercial every year of the Republican taking grandma and throwing her off the cliff because that's the way that they think about older people, right? But that's just a sign of the times, right? I think that there are certain things that the market bears, and I think competition is good in most things. Keep in mind, I'm a small businessman, but I think that in health, in people's livelihoods, right? I do think that there's a role for the government, and I think right now Obamacare is not perfect, but we're getting close.
So is it a role? Say Trump wins the election. Say Trump comes in, he repeals Obamacare, then he starts with Medicare. So there is a role for government.
There is a role for the poorest of the poor in society, but honestly, the religious charities like the Catholic Church historically have been the best providers of health care at the local level. And we have the Obama administration, and if Hillary comes into office, the Hillary administration, that are going to dictate to Catholic churches what they can do and not do against their conscience.
The latest polls are showing that once again, African American voters are overwhelmingly siding with Hillary Clinton. And while that's not such a surprise, what the results say about why might be. This is Howard University. It's a historically black college that's been around since 1867.
Technically, we should be including these in our objectives.
Students here attend class, but they also the larger issues in life. Been helping to make the thousands of calls in a survey to gauge the thoughts of African Americans on the U.S. election. For the poll, Thomas asked a cross-section of voters about everything from foreign policy to the LGBT community.
I think what was striking for me was that the millennial voters and the older voters actually have very similar passions, I guess, when it comes to the way that the country, the direction that the country needs to go.
Dr. Clarence Lusane says the results also show the shift in Democratic support.
There are a lot of young African Americans who supported Bernie Sanders, for example, but who also, perhaps more than their white counterparts, recognize or believe that there is such a danger in a Trump presidency that they have decided to become supportive of Secretary Clinton.
From here in the District of Columbia to swing states across the country, black voters are carefully considering their options. In the crucial battleground state of Florida, there are 1.7 million registered black voters, and so far Clinton has gained a majority of their support. Hillary! Hillary! Some who came to this rally in Tampa say it's part of a visceral reaction to her opponent.
The race is a one-person race. I don't even classify Trump as a person right now. He has just taken dignity out of the election.
Trump for president. Trump is the man, baby.
But these Blacks for Trump say his policy plans are far better for the whole race.
The way the society is set up, we're regulated and taxed out of everything. So you force us into situations where a brother's gonna go do something wicked like sell drugs and all this other stuff because he can't do business. Now when Donald Trump says he's gonna take taxes down, now the businesses will move back. Now everybody can get a job. You ready?
The picture black voters have in their minds of the candidates is no doubt diverse, and it's an image they will take to the polls in about a week to determine the direction of the nation. Tatiana Anderson, TRT World, Washington. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, America has always had a strong sense of what it means to be an American. But Francis Collings traveled to one community that still struggles with this ideal.
It's a stark contrast to the life they know and have left behind.
They are free.
Anas and Abir, along with their 5 children, are from Hama in Syria. Most recently, they were living in miserable conditions in a refugee camp in Jordan. But now they're settling into a new life in Memphis, Tennessee. The difference in living conditions is stark, but the welcome has been warm from a country that can appear to be against Muslim immigration.
When I first came, I was worried about this. Their society is different to ours, but when I went out to public places, we had really good experiences with people. They welcomed us and were very respectful.
There is a sizable Muslim community here that gathers at a local mosque not far away. We've just seen Friday prayers at this mosque in Memphis, in Tennessee, in the deep south of the United States. This is one of the largest mosques in the city. It's a beacon for people in the surrounding area, but it's also becoming something of a hub of advice as a place of worship for those who are new to the United States and new to Memphis. But many have come to the United States against the backdrop of a fierce presidential campaign. One that has seen more than its fair share of anti-immigration rhetoric, including a proposed ban on Muslim immigrants. The imam of the mosque says it's caused a lot of upset.
I would like to tell Mr. Trump that what you are trying to do is you are trying to destroy the fabric of the society. You are trying to ignite war and hatred among people. You are trying to leave a mark on this country that might hurt it for so many years to come, and it will be hard to heal again.
Purest form, that's what declaratory relief is about.
It's not simply a case of being anti-immigration, according to Republican officials in the state. There are serious concerns.
We had testimony from David Shedd, who's the former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He came to Nashville and testified that in the world where you have situations where nation states no longer exist, the vetting system, which he took credit for creating, is no longer viable.
At this moment, the politics of the United States has no bearing on how Anas and Aber feel. They're happy to be here and safe. But the chances of others in refugee camps making the same journey to the US may hinge on what happens in November's presidential election. Francis Collins, TRT World, in Memphis, Tennessee.
One thing is clear in this election: nothing is guaranteed. You've got families divided straight down the middle. Families that were stalwart Democrat or Republican until the end. And now those Republicans are wondering if they can still support their candidate.
Autumn, the fall as it's called in the United States, is at its best at this time of the year. The natural colour is tempered this October by the dark and pale blue of election posters. In this highly politicised state, despite a majority of registered voters being Republican, all polls point towards Democrats winning New Hampshire. So what's going wrong for the Republicans?
I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Republican. I feel like my party has left me. There's somebody at the top of the ticket that I don't relate to, that I don't understand, that in fact I have a bit of a visceral reaction to.
She and her family are Mormons, originally from Utah, and arrived in New Hampshire a year ago. Hopkinton, near the state capital Concord, is an area that attracts the wealthy and the well-educated. Lorianne, a Republican fundraiser, calls herself a natural conservative who cannot vote for Donald Trump.
I understand that Republicans need to win at all levels, and to vote for the top of the ticket is helpful, but it's not something I can in good conscience do, unfortunately.
10% of New Hampshire voters say they'll support an independent candidate. Others believe Donald Trump is the leader they and the country have been waiting for.
I've seen that he is representing a lot of what is really important, and maybe what we've got now is we've got a street fighter when we don't need somebody who's going to be proper and respectful necessarily of everything.
Let's get out there, let's get it done, and let's leave no stone unturned and no vote on the floor, okay?
Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey has come to campaign for Democrats in New Hampshire because a good result here is seen as important.
Thank you, okay? Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
You won't see many senators and members of Congress doing this all-style type of canvassing anymore. But local Democrat Lou D'Alessandro says that talking to people directly about politics, healthcare, or even the drug problem in New Hampshire is very important for local politics.
In order to win an election, you've got to be likable and they've got to trust you. Forget about policy. People don't get to policy. They like you, they trust you, they think you're going to make their life better.
So, in New Hampshire, do they like Trump or do they like Clinton?
I don't think that they really like either one. Who do they trust the most?
Hillary Clinton, according to a recent opinion poll, has a clear lead over Donald Trump. The headache for some voters is they don't like either presidential candidate. Yolo Abdavid, TRT World, New Hampshire.
The Republican Party and the Democratic Party have each put forth their candidate. But what about an option C, or D for that matter? Colin Campbell looks outside America's two-party system.
Street performer Chris Hunter still doesn't know who to vote for.
I'm Democrat and Republican, right down the middle. I'm right down the middle, I really am.
Hunter won't be voting for either leading candidate. He's part of a large number of Americans who are dissatisfied with the country's two-party system and feels the two major parties don't offer enough choice.
That's what I find wrong with the two-party election. We really have four parties, but you only get to ever hear from two of them.
America's two-party system emerged in the late 1700s. It's evolved a considerable amount since then, but many now believe it has become too partisan.
The two-party system is sort of a restrictive competition between two huge parties. What happens is they pretend to compete, but under the table they collude.
In recent years, the United States has seen a rise in voices calling for third parties. Politics have highlighted the American public's growing dissatisfaction with the two-party system.
If recent polls are any indication, Americans are hungry for a third party. Many are voicing their frustration over the current state of the economy and the lack of employment opportunities, among other issues. The two parties are being viewed more as polarizing than effective.
That's one of the great talents that I've seen with Dr. Jill Stein.
Kerry Campbell, a Green Party member, feels that the partisanship between Republicans and Democrats is creating opportunities.
The failure of the two larger parties, of course, is economically. The economic opportunity isn't there for middle-class folks.
But for now, the political will from Americans hasn't been loud enough to create a seismic change in the two-party system. With the presidential candidates in their final campaign weeks, Hillary Clinton leads Donald Trump by a small margin. Every vote will count, but Hunter says he doesn't care.
And this year is probably the only year I'm probably going to write in somebody else's name. I don't really want Hillary or Donald Trump. Someone's going to have to change the two-party system. It isn't going to work anymore.
Despite many Americans calling for political party reforms, the two-party system is all they've got, even as some hope for more options. Colin Campbell, TRT World, Washington.
Our correspondents have traveled the country speaking to voters about what matters to them most. A lot of attention has been paid to the people on the podium, but ultimately it's the faces you'll see every day that will decide who will become the next president of the United States. I'm Tatiana Anderson, and this is TRT World.
My daddy, he was a Democrat. My mom was a Democrat. My whole family was Democrat. And it's a shame that we have to do this.
This election is very important for me because Latino community need to demonstrate we can decide about our future. The most important issues for me is immigration rights.
I don't think anyone in the politics of Mississippi intentionally would hurt anybody. I just don't think that's in their heart.
How about you, bro? What's up, man? Are you ready to go? You want to get rested real quick? It'll take no time at all.
I know there's some people now who are working as college professors who are in upper 50s who will not be able to retire because of student debt they incurred long before this was a hot button issue.
Every steel worker in this valley in 1970, there was 10 jobs came off of his job. There was gas station clerks attending the school. So every time you lost 5,000 steel workers, you lost 50,000 people in this valley who don't have jobs.
It's a disaster how much food we've exported, or food production has left the country. And if we don't deal with it properly, we'll be buying our milk from Mexico, or we can have the workers from Mexico come here and produce the milk here. I'd much rather produce it here.
Get the latest news from around the globe at trtworld.com.
Beşten büyüktür.
Beauty contest. Said she doesn't have the stamina.
Hi, I'm Samantha Johnson. Welcome to Beyond the Game, and we've got quite the show coming up for you. They somehow lost to Bangladesh, so how will England fare against the mighty India? Twitter troll or sports minister? South Africa's controversial sports boss is in trouble yet again. And from being a pro footballer to a pro wrestler, talk about a career change. It's less than 2 weeks since the England cricket team were humbled by a spirited Bangladeshi side. The Tigers produced a stunning victory for the first time in history, drawing the preparations for the Test series against the world's best-ranked side. India, Gary Priest has this report.
If this was any other series, there'd be plenty of things for English cricket fans to get excited about. Teenage hotshot Hasib Hamid is set to become only the 6th teenager to ever play for England, and the first to do so at the top of the batting order. And opening bowler Stuart Broad will be earning his 100th Test cap. And when Alistair Cook takes the field on Wednesday, he'll break Michael Atherton's record of 54 Tests as England captain. But instead, the headlines are pretty ominous for English fans. In this month's Cricketer magazine, Alistair Cook suggested that this series could be his last in charge. And India's cricket board had threatened to call off the first match altogether after a dispute over funding with state associations. Despite the sideshows, England's challenge remains clear. They're facing the best side in the world in their own backyard.
Anytime you play the number 1 side or number 2 side in their backyard, they're very confident in the conditions. It's a huge task for us and a huge challenge with this kind of guys who haven't played a huge amount of cricket in the subcontinent as a group.
What will undoubtedly worry English fans is that Captain Cook's Indian counterpart seems incredibly focused on improving a side that's already on top of the world rankings.
We understand that we need to keep improving every day as a team, especially the mindset is not to compete anymore. We want to win series, we want to win test matches. So for that you need to be at your A game all the time and even keep improving on your A game as well. So that's been the mindset. The guys are ready for the challenge. I think these kind of matches and series are something that you play for against top sides. It tests your character, tests your skill, and you come out as a better cricketer regardless of the results. So that's something we're really looking forward to.
Some pundits are predicting a 5-0 whitewash for the home side, with some bookmakers offering as low as 3-1. For England, this may well be a series to experiment and lay some groundwork for the future. After all, nobody's expecting a surprise win.
Well, earlier we spoke to R.K. Srinivasan, presenter of India's 10 Sport channel, and how he sees the series playing out.
I think as far as Virat Kohli is concerned, as far as Anil Kumble is concerned, they know that they would go in without any shades of complacency. They would want to underestimate England at their own peril, because we've seen England being one of the better sides to have visited the Indian subcontinent in the past. Their performance haven't been really bad. In fact, it's been encouraging. So you will only discount England at your own peril. But having said that, the mentality of these two teams going into this particular series is pretty much like chalk and cheese. I mean, India riding on a high at the back of a fantastic win against New Zealand, and they know they're going to stay home for a considerable amount of time because they've got plenty more of test matches coming through, as opposed to an English side which is coming at the back of a rather disappointing test loss against Bangladesh. England would always look back at what happened the last time they came here to play test match cricket. They lost the first test at Ahmedabad, but they came back strongly. And every time England has visited India, let's not forget, Ashley Giles has had a reasonably good tour of India. You've had the likes of Monty Panesar, who has come in and picked up wickets. Graeme Swann has come and picked up wickets as well. So who is going to get those wickets? That's the big question that Alistair Cook will have to find an answer to, really. Because when you look at that batting order, the Indian batting order, it's really, really strong. Virat Kohli is looking very, very good. Rahane is looking good. I mean, everywhere it's looking strong. Yes, there are injuries, few and far between. But having said that, there's a young team which is gelling really well under Virat Kohli. So I don't think the injuries should put too much of a dent in India's confidence. Yes, from England's perspective, they could see it as an opening, but it's a narrow one at that, really. As far as Alistair Cook is concerned, he's been there for a while. I think this is what, his 55th test, if I'm not wrong, as a captain. So he's been there for a while now. But in terms of motivation levels, or in terms of the graph, the career graph in terms of captaincy, I think Virat Kohli is on the ascendancy. The first test is going to be extremely crucial. I'll tell you what, I mean, it might sound a bit cliche, but I think toss is going to play a huge role. I think Alistair Cook will be seriously hoping that he wins the toss and bats first in Rajkot. Yes, spin will play a part. I mean, it's no rocket science really. But I think at the end of the day, the first test, win the toss, it's really Alistair Cook. That's something that he would have his fingers crossed for. I personally think Rajkot should belong to India because of the surface and because of the attack. I think Mohali, around Mohali time is when England will have a grip. That's personally, if you ask me, that's where they're going to have a grip of things. But I think, I mean, I wouldn't go and predict a scoreline, but I think it's going to be, I see India as a clear winner here. I see India as a clear winner.
Winning a medal for your country at the Olympics is quite possibly the highlight of any athlete's career. Now, the UK welcomed their winners with a heroes parade, but in South Africa, things are quite different. The country's sports minister promised medal winners a cash bonus, but it turns out he's picking and choosing who he pays. And now he's been busted on Twitter. Here's Lance Santos.
This is the South African sports minister, the leader of a very proud sporting nation, a member of parliament too. But these are some of the things he says this time the national football team in the firing line.
What I saw there was not a problem of coaching, was a bunch of losers who don't have got any respect for this country, have got any respect for anybody. But what did they come to meet? Just a bunch of unbearable, useless individuals.
Fikile Mbulala is no stranger to public spats. He spends plenty of time on Twitter, amusing his followers and attacking those who disagree. He's fallen out with plenty in SA. And now there's a new name to add to that list, Sunette Viljoen, South Africa's javelin silver medalist at Rio. Before any SA athletes set foot at the Olympic Games, Fikile Mbulala promised medal winners a cash bonus. Some athletes were duly paid shortly after Rio, but Sunette was not, so she wrote this message to the minister. Dear Mr. Minister, hope you are well. I just wanted to ask nicely, when will receive my 70,000 Rand, which is around $5,000, from Rio? I really need it. Hope you can help. Have a lovely day. Fikile replied, you said you don't need it, so I stick with your wishes. Sunette tweeted the conversation denying that she'd ever said she did not want or need the money. Then the sports minister tweeted a whole string of abusive messages aimed at Viljoen. The spelling mistakes are his, not ours, by the way. Mbulala admitted that he'd promised the money but claims he'd been harassed by Sunette. He produced no evidence of this. He later finished with the following. Sunette Viljoen is the most arrogant and thankless person, let alone being an athlete, I've ever met. Not what you'd expect from your sports minister, is it?
No, it isn't, Lance. Right, for more on this Twitter war, let's go to our regular South Africa sports journalist, Lungani Zamba, who's in Durban. Thank you for joining us today. Now, you've got to set the record straight for me. Who's in the wrong here? Is it the minister or the athletes?
Hi, Samantha. Yeah, I think obviously the minister is completely out of line. I mean, to go public in the manner that he has and criticize somebody who's brought such pride to the country is, you know, it doesn't show great leadership.
Well, it's not the first time that he's actually been involved in a controversial matter. I mean, should his behaviour be called into question? This is not very professional of him.
No, it's not very professional at all. And I think the biggest issue with Mbulala is that he loves being the centre of attention and having a soundbite. And he's called the national football team, he's called the national cricket team, the national rugby team. So whenever there's a controversy, he's never far.
So he's been doing this for, you know, so many times. Why hasn't it been reprimanded? Why hasn't someone kind of pulled him by the ear and said, look, you know what, you having all these Twitter wars, it's not really the best thing to happen?
Samantha, I don't think Beyond the Game has enough time for me to go into the issues why he hasn't been called to book.
Well, okay, you don't have to go into it all, but just give us a good insight into why he's getting away with so many controversial comments.
He's probably getting away with all these comments because as a country, we've got bigger political problems than the sports minister. And one of his main issues is the fact that he's never actually served in sports administration. So he doesn't really know the nuances and what goes behind the scenes into most of these things. He's normally seen in the front row once somebody has either brought shame or fame into the country, just like Sunette Viljoen did at the Olympics. You see him at medal ceremonies, you see him when teams are being handed. He was there to see Sundowns win the Africa Champions League, for example, but you don't see him in the trenches. So he's very sensationalist.
So what's going to happen to him now? I mean, is he basically untouchable?
In many ways, you could say that, because this is the initial bonus of 250,000 to be shared by the athlete and the coach was paid out by SASCOC, the athletic body. But this was a bonus on top of a bonus, if you will. And he promised it, again, sensationally at a press conference where he called himself Father Christmas. But obviously, Father Christmas hasn't delivered this time, and Sunette Viljoen is one of the few athletes who are still waiting. So he is in a sense untouchable, because if he doesn't pay the money, what can Sunette Viljoen do?
Okay, so sorry for the technical difficulties, but thank you for joining us on the show today. Gosh, it's all a bit awkward, isn't it? Still to come. Well, it might be under a bit of pressure, but Mourinho still shows he has a sense of humour. You've got to check it out. And have you ever dreamt of a career change? Well, this guy took the plunge and he hasn't looked back.
Excited to see the next technological breakthrough.
We landed on Mars.
Everyone should have the right to an education.
Less talking, more action.
A cure for cancer
is an issue that is very close to all.
Plus de respect pour everyone, men and
women. On my head is all I need. To end the war on terror. Extinguishing family
a better understanding of mental health. Mejor comida en las escuelas para los hijos. A female president of the US right now.
To end the war on terror. A revolution.
Music, film, photography, fashion, design. The world of art and culture here on TRT World. Showcase brings you the latest from around the world, guides you behind the scenes and talks to the movers and shakers. Informative, fascinating and surprising. That's Showcase every day on TRT World.
We're currently driving towards the incident.
We're reporting to you from the very heart of the storm. The cause of the explosion is found. Smoke and debris. We do now have unconfirmed reports.
The number of casualties is rising as we speak. Here on the ground, there's a lot of commotion. Some of the eyewitnesses.
There's been a social
People are taking to social media outlets to discuss.
Reports of the explosion are now spreading like wildfire. People are clearly shaken by what has been a horrific incident.
That is one tough relay. Now, Liverpool fans are no doubt enjoying themselves this week after going top of the Premier League table. Now, they hammered Watford 6-1 at the weekend and leapfrogged Chelsea to the top of the pile. It's the first time the Reds have nabbed the top spot under German manager Jurgen Klopp, and it's the first time since May 2014 that they've gone a point clear over Man City. In the first 11 matches, Liverpool have 8 wins, 2 draws and 1 loss. And along the way, they've scored an impressive 30 goals, more than any other Liverpool side in history at this stage of the season. But it's not quite enough to convince Klopp of their status as title contenders. When asked if they're the favourites, his response was that they'd have to check back in February or March. But he's clearly happy with the way things are going.
This wonderful club changed philosophy 3 or 4 times in the last 10, 15 years because different managers came in, let's do this, let's change this. That's English kind of doing things, obviously. The new manager is coming and then what do have changed? Everything. The former manager got sacked because the results were not good, but a lot of things around this could have been good, actually. And we try to create a situation where everything around is perfect.
Love that man. Right, just days after losing to Ireland in Chicago, the All Blacks have had another setback, this time at the World Rugby Awards. Only 2 Kiwis have been named on the 6-man shortlist for the Player of the Year, along with 3 from England and 1 Irishman. Beyond the game, take a look at the runners and riders. There's pranks galore for today's virals. Check these out. Now, Cristiano Ronaldo, you got served, mate. And it looks like we have his Portugal teammate, Ricardo Quaresma, to thank for this gem. And it's all in the name of revenge. Now, he had his car wrapped up in tinfoil with CR7 written across it last year. But I suppose this is one way to liven up a photo shoot. He got him good. He got him good. Now, yesterday we showed you Borussia Dortmund's mannequin challenge, but we're heading back stateside with the Kentucky Wildcats basketball team upping the ante and getting the whole stadium involved. Very, very impressive. Now, this guy must have a serious pain in the neck. Freestyler Ash Randall held the ball still for 38 seconds as Man United players walked straight past him, resisting the urge to spoil the trick. But have a look at this. Good old Jose Mourinho just couldn't resist. It's nice to see he's still got a sense of humour, because it hasn't been the easiest of weeks. Now, how close is football to professional wrestling? Well, if you ask the former German international goalkeeper Tim Wesser, then closer than you think. After a 15-year career in the Bundesliga, Wesser made his debut as a professional wrestler. Who knows? Maybe he's a better wrestler than a goalkeeper.
Switching from football to wrestling is not exactly common. However, former German international goalkeeper Tim Wiese decided to make that jump. The 34-year-old hung up his boots 3 years ago after winning 6 caps for Germany and making their 2010 World Cup squad. But now, after packing 40 kilos, thanks to an intensive training schedule and a very strict diet, he was able to make his wrestling debut, and he won.
The secrets are food and what you do when you are not training. No alcohol, plenty of water and lots of meat. You have to eat almost 1 kilo of meat per day.
But is it difficult to jump from a sport like football to something completely different like wrestling? Not for Tim Wiese.
When I played football, I was already the bad guy. They whistle at me in the stadium, but it doesn't bother me.
The German is now working for the WWE, America's largest wrestling organization. Although he's yet to be given his wrestling nickname, he admits he's enjoying every minute of his new career.
Wahnsinn. It's unbelievable. In America it was brutal. The instructors want to see if you can bite, and that's really my thing.
With his football career, Wiese decided to call it a day after a fallout with bosses at German club Hoffenheim in January 2013. In all, he made 269 appearances in Germany's top-flight league, most of them during a 7-year spell with Werder Bremen.
Well, that's your lot on Beyond the Game. I'll leave you with day 2 of sailing around the world race, the Vendée Globe. Catch you later.
From Wall Street to Main Street and the people in power, money talks and so do we. Corruption, technology, jobs, if it affects you, it affects us. We have reports from around the world and hear from the people in the know to make financial news your business. Wherever there's money, there's a story. Join me, Matthew Moore, for Money Talks on TRT World.
Just coming in to TRT World.
Our TRT news team are the first on the scene.
Hundreds of pages of evidence.
For America's most wanted terrorists.
We're piecing together all the facts.
We've discovered more than we ever imagined.
In days or even weeks. It's taken months upon months upon months. No stone has been left unturned.
Information has been sourced from the darkest corners. The truth is coming to light. This is one story that will touch millions of people.
The world is just a click away. Get the latest news from around the globe with fast and accurate coverage at trtworld.com.
US voters go to the polls in one of the most bitter and divisive presidential elections in living memory. Hello and welcome to TRT World Live from Istanbul. I'm Matthew Moore, also ahead on the programme. Entirely liberated, Peshmerga forces say they've recaptured a key town on the outskirts of Mosul. Turkey says it has a deal with the United States to prevent the YPG from entering Raqqa. And they've got that sinking feeling a large section of road in Japan is swallowed whole. So US voters are heading to the polls to choose a new president after perhaps the most bitterly fought contest in a generation. Both candidates are now in New York after wrapping up their campaigns. Hillary Clinton has already voted with her husband Bill in the town of Chappaqua, where they live, and Donald Trump has cast his ballot in Manhattan.
It is the most humbling feeling, Dan, because, I know how much responsibility goes with this, and so many people are counting on the outcome of this election, what it means for our country, and I'll do the very best I can if I'm fortunate enough to win today.
I'm very excited. It's a great opportunity. There's tremendous enthusiasm from everybody. You see it all over the country, all over the world. It's been a great feeling.
And we have John Brain in New York, keeping an eye on affairs for us there. The pollsters are predicting a Clinton victory. What's the mood in the Trump camp, John?
But we'll have to wait and see. But bear in mind that Donald Trump has been the outsider right from the start of this process. Who'd have thought all those months ago, 17 prospective candidates, that he would be at the stage he's at now. So they're not being put off by these polls suggesting that Hillary Clinton may be edging towards the White House. They're still fairly confident, still fairly determined, and of course there's still a long way to go yet.
John, we're hearing that Trump has just sued Nevada over polling place hours. What more can you tell us about that one?
Yes, this is the district of Clark County in Nevada. The Trump team are alleging that the polling station was used to be, so they filed a lawsuit or legal action against that. These things tend to happen in elections. Sometimes they amount to something, sometimes they don't. We'll have to see. Of course, the question is, will Clark County, Nevada, really be the tipping point for the election? If it does prove decisive, then the Trump team are likely to pursue that. But at this stage, it's really too early to assess the significance of that. But it does play into this narrative that Trump has been saying that he might not accept the result of the election. But as I say, we're still many hours to go yet.
John Brain in New York, thank you very much. We're going to go to Washington now because aside from the bitter exchanges, this presidential campaign has not been without some of the lighter moments. And for that, we're going to go to Colin Campbell. Colin, is this going to be one of the election's lighter moments, or are you there for us?
Yeah, we can say that there could be a lighter moment right here outside of the Capitol building. Of course, it's a beautiful day here. Great day to vote. Also a great day for a little bit of madness, if you can hear right behind me. There's a protester who's been here for the past hour shouting all kinds of things. One of the most important things that would fit into today, however, is to vote. And of course, there are about 469 seats up for grabs here at Congress. About 34 of those are in the Senate. And so what would need to happen for the Democrats to take control of the Senate is to win about 30 of those seats. Now, earlier this year, at the beginning of October, it was looked at as a win for the Democrats, as it was polled about 60% of those Democrats would take those seats, but now it looks a lot slimmer. That margin looks a lot slimmer now after some scandals came out in mid-October. Here in Washington, however, so many people are waiting for this election to be over, this election cycle. We've seen some craziness along the campaign trail. Of course, President Obama is playing basketball, which is what he does on Election Day. We saw Donald Trump vote earlier today, but before he showed up to vote in New York, some protesters rolled through that election, that polling place topless. So that was part of the craziness there. And of course, online, we have seen Pantsuit Nation galvanize around the Democratic candidate, Hillary Clinton. So there's lots going on here in Washington, D.C., some craziness, some concern. It's all wrapped up into this election cycle.
OK, Colin, I'm glad we have you on that story, keeping an eye on the craziness there. Now, way back at the beginning of her campaign for the White House, Hillary Clinton criticized many of Donald Trump's supporters, denouncing what she called the alt-right. It was a movement few people had heard of then, but now those who subscribe to it boast that if they are getting their way, they'll take over the Republican Party. And as Matthew Symington reports, its ideas and methods often provoke outrage.
If there's one movement that has shaken America's political system more than any other this election cycle, it's the alt-right. So what is it? Well, the answer to that question depends on who you ask. Take Hillary Clinton.
Anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, anti-women, all key tenets making up the emerging racist ideology known as the alt-right.
Or Milo Yiannopoulos, tech editor of the right-wing website Breitbart and poster boy for the alt-right movement.
It cares about Western values. It cares about liberal, capitalist, Western democracy, democratic values, freedom, equality, that kind of thing. And it sees, various threats to those on various fronts.
The movement exists mostly online, on websites like 4chan and Reddit forums. It's predominantly male, young, and it loves to cause outrage. The alt-right's followers are experts at internet trolling, targeting what they call cultural Marxism, including political correctness and social justice campaigners. Supporters say they're defending Western values. Their critics say they're defending white, male supremacy.
Let's go. Let's go.
These fault lines are often exposed over cultural issues like the new Ghostbusters movie. It was an all-female cast, and when the trailer was released, it provoked a storm of criticism on the internet. And people didn't hold back about why they thought it was so bad. As the row over Ghostbusters heated up, many Twitter users rounded on black actress Leslie Jones, directing a stream of racist abuse towards her. Milo Yiannopoulos was accused of fanning the flames and banned from Twitter. He says the site has an anti-conservative bias. In terms of policy, the alt-right movement is clear on some issues. It's anti-immigration, anti-globalization, and anti-foreign intervention. And that means supporters fall firmly within the Trump camp.
How much are you being paid? $1,500?
But whoever wins the election, this is a movement that's growing in scale and force. And we'll be hearing plenty more from it. Matthew Symington, TRT World.
Well, also coming up on the programme, we have the latest from northern Iraq, where Peshmerga forces have recaptured the key town of Bashika. And the more it eats, the bigger it grows. An expanding sinkhole swallows a 4-lane intersection in Japan.
Are you ready? Who's gonna pay for the wall?
Beauty contest. Said she doesn't have the stamina.
Welcome back to TRT World. A reminder of our top stories now. Polls have opened in the US presidential election. The two candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, have both cast their ballots in New York. On Monday, they had their last opportunity to appeal to voters.
Hours away from a once-in-a-lifetime change. We're going to have real change, not Obama change.
A choice between division or unity, between an economy that works for everyone or only those at the top.
Well, we can go live to New York now. Our reporter Mimi Chairman is there for us. Mimi, you're quite close to Wall Street. How are markets reacting there to this race?
Very close to Wall Street indeed, and markets are rallying. We saw stocks start to edge up on Monday after the FBI finished their most recent probe into Hillary Clinton's email with the same conclusion, saying that no charges are warranted. We saw stocks globally react with relief to that news, and it looks like Wall Street, although it's still early, is betting on Hillary Clinton to win. She is the safer option for Wall Street, although not all of her policies are necessarily in line with what decided to elect as the next president of the United States.
Okay, Mimi, that's the finance world out of the way. What about the politics? How's the voting going in New York?
Well, definitely well underway. Some 43 million Americans have already cast their votes. We've seen record numbers of early voters in this particular election. In Florida, especially, a key swing battleground state, we've seen already 6.5 million already, at least, votes coming out of Florida. And that's really important. It could be the pivot state that hands the election to either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. There are 29 electoral votes up for grabs out of Florida, out of the 270 that are available. And there, many analysts saying that Hillary Clinton has done quite well with the Latino vote. Many of those folks going in to vote early as well. And as we say, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have both already cast their votes for themselves. Hillary Clinton said it was a humbling feeling, while Donald Trump was met by some boos as he went in to vote for himself. But he said he has a pretty good feeling about the election.
Mimi Chairman, thank you very much for that report in New York. Now, after a fierce battle, Iraq's northwestern town of Bashika has been recaptured from Daesh by Kurdish Peshmerga forces. But the town has been left devastated after 2 years under the control of the terror group, and the Peshmergas say it'll take some time to rebuild. Nicole Johnston reports.
The Peshmergas say they've liberated Bashika, but from the roof, it still looks a bit shaky. There are airstrikes and explosions. You can hear fighting in the streets. And driving around town, you can't help but wonder, what is the cost of this liberation? A town once known for its olive groves has been reduced to ruins. Deserted, except for dead Daesh fighters. What was the most difficult challenge that the Peshmerga forces faced trying to defeat Daesh here?
None of the fight against ISIS is easy, but the plan was put together by the president, and it was a very successful plan. The right plan will only guarantee you a 60% chance of succeeding, though.
Daesh were preparing for urban conflict, punching holes through walls, ready to move from house to house undercover. And they dug in, deep underground.
Here's the tunnel.
The Peshmergas say they've uncovered lots of them.
This is as far as we'll go in this tunnel because it hasn't been properly cleared and we don't know even how long it is. But you can see how Daesh has built it. The foundations of the house on one side, and here they've chipped into the earth.
Daesh had been here for over 2 years, and it had the town to itself. Almost everyone had fled: the Yazidis, Christians, and the Kurdish Shia community, the Shabak. The odds were always in the Peshmerga's favour. 5,000 of them, up against between 60 and 150 Daesh fighters. Now the clean-up is underway, clearing houses and streets. It's a slow process. There are improvised explosives and booby-trapped cars. But for the Kurdish fighters, this was a day to celebrate. This young Peshmerga tells me that even after 3 or 4 days of battle, if they see a Daesh body, it motivates them to continue fighting. For months, the Peshmerga have captured villages across northern Iraq. And Bashika is a big prize for the Kurds. Not only have they defeated Daesh, they've added another town to their rapidly expanding territory.
And Nicole joins us live now from Bashika. Nicole, you did touch on it a little, but can you expand on what capturing Bashika means for the Kurds?
Well, first of all, I'm joining you from Erbil, but what it means for the Kurds is it started at the beginning of the year. The Kurds have been taking, as I said in that report, villages and towns in the disputed territory between
the Kurdish north of Iraq and the proper Iraqi side of the country. Now, this has been a big dispute between the government in Erbil and the government in Baghdad. And in effect, the battle with Daesh has enabled the Kurdish regional government to expand its territory by more than 50%, a huge gain for the Kurds. And it was quite extraordinary as we were driving from Bartella on the outskirts of Mosul towards Bashika to see this almost de facto border, this new border for the Kurdish north. They say that they will never give this territory back to Baghdad and that all of these towns and villages that they've managed to capture from Daesh now belong to them.
And Nicole, we don't usually ask you about the challenges of reporting from the field, but we saw in your report there and heard in your report there gunfire. Just tell us a little bit about the difficulties of following this story for us.
It's difficult to talk about the difficulties, really. I guess most of the time you're focused on just trying to get the story, and if anything, it's the people who are involved, whether it's the forces or civilians, that should probably be the main focus. But of course, all of these areas, as you saw in that report, are still very dangerous. The town was only liberated technically early this morning, but there were still airstrikes, there was still gunfire and artillery going on. As you saw, I mean, the town hasn't been properly cleared. It could take weeks to do that. So certainly as a news crew or anyone moving into that sort of area, you're very careful. You tend to stick to the outskirts of the town because the centre of it is probably one of the most dangerous areas that hasn't been cleared, and you just move very carefully.
OK, and of course the greater prize is Mosul eventually. What does this give us an indication as to how that battle will go?
It does in some respects. This was perhaps the first time that the Kurds had really had to engage in an urban battle. This was street-to-street fighting, house to house. You saw that in the report. You saw how Daesh had punched out these holes in walls to move between different houses. And it's some indication of what the Iraqi forces are now up against in Mosul, a densely populated area, even more so in Mosul. At this stage, they're still on the eastern side of the Tigris River. Eventually, they'll move to the west, which is even more packed with people. So if this is a sign of how hard it is in Bashika, it's going to be 10 or 100 times worse trying to liberate Mosul from Daesh.
Nicole Johnston in Erbil in Iraq, thank you. Well, the US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces are making progress in taking back the northern city of Raqqa. The SDF says it has captured 11 villages and rural areas north of Daesh's stronghold in Syria. Well, Turkey has been opposed to this offensive on Raqqa because a majority of the fighters are from the YPG, which is the Syrian branch of the PKK terror group. US and Turkish military leaders held talks on the issue in Ankara on Sunday and agreed to develop a long-term plan for seizing and governing Raqqa. TRT World's Ediz Tianshan is in Gaziantep. He says the Syrian regime is using air power to its advantage in driving rebels out of East Aleppo.
The fighting between the Syrian regime and the rebel groups continue unabated, particularly in the city of Aleppo, where the regime forces are keen on taking the entire city from the rebel groups, who are now under the siege of the regime for many months. And as they attempt to break the siege, in the latest round of fighting, we understand that they had actually lost further ground. According to a footage released by the regime-owned media, we understand that the district of so-called 1,070 apartments is now back in the hands of the regime forces, as the latest attempt by the rebel groups to break the siege has been foiled and they've lost further ground. And we also understand that the Syrian regime continues to deploy its leverage of aerial power in many parts of the country. One of the latest attacks came in the northern. 2 pregnant women were killed in airstrikes carried out by the regime targeting residential areas. And we've also seen further airstrikes just outside of Damascus, the capital, which is a stronghold of the regime, but it's been surrounded by areas that are still controlled by rebels that are now consistently under the regime attacks, especially airstrikes, and at least 11 civilians were killed in particularly the eastern Ghouta suburb of Damascus, as dozens more were also injured.
Now, more than 1,000 lawyers and activists in Hong Kong have held a protest against Beijing's decision to ban 2 elected lawmakers from taking office. Dressed in black, local and foreign lawyers walked to the city's highest court, where they stayed silent for 3 minutes. It came a day after the Chinese parliament banned the pro-independence lawmakers from the Legislative Council. Well, they were barred for speaking out against Beijing and carrying a banner that read, "Hong Kong is not China," during their swearing-in ceremony last month.
I believe the majority of the Hong Kong people support us protesting in a peaceful and orderly way. Maybe a big one, maybe a small one, but still, most people want it to be peaceful and orderly. Every day we turn on the television screen, we see these very violent clashes in Europe, in the Middle East, in America. But here, it's very peaceful, and we want to preserve that. But then we tell Beijing, don't think because we're so peaceful, then you can trample on us like that. And so I certainly hope that the Hong Kong people will exercise restraint and conduct our protests in a peaceful way.
Well, also in Hong Kong, a jury has found a British banker, Rurik Juting, guilty of murdering 2 Indonesian women. Their mutilated bodies were found in his apartment in 2014. In a statement read out by his lawyer, Juting expressed remorse for the killings and called his actions horrific. Now, more than 20,000 people have been arrested in the Philippines since President Rodrigo Duterte launched his war against drugs and crime. Now, that means living conditions in prisons are even worse than before. But as Nafisa Latich reports, many inmates don't want to leave.
These inmates need to take turns to sleep. This is the Quezon City prison in Manila. It was built 60 years ago for 800 people. Now it's home to more than 3,000 inmates, many of them arrested during Duterte's war on drugs. But despite the overcrowding, some prisoners are happy to stay where they are.
I feel much safer here than outside, because all of the people involved in drugs are being killed outside.
The problem is there is no room for all of them. They sleep on the concrete floor of the basket court, if they manage to find an empty place. Each toilet here is shared by 150 people.
Inmates get sick because they don't get to sleep comfortably at night. Those other inmates who can't be accommodated inside cell, they just sleep here in the courtyard of the facility.
Most of the inmates can leave if they post bail, but these people are too poor and too scared to go back on the streets. Nearly 2,300 drug users and dealers have been killed since the crackdown started. After President Rodrigo Duterte took an office in June, he urged people to kill drug addicts and dealers and announce a war on drugs, particularly a cheap form of crystal meth called shabu, the most popular drug in the country.
We shall not be cowed. We will press on. We must redouble our efforts to concentrate on intelligence gathering, prevention, interdiction, arrest, and prosecution.
Human rights groups and Western governments have criticized the drug campaign, but it's been popular in the Philippines. It's even prompted many drug users to turn themselves in, even though prisons like the one in Quezon City has ran out of room. Nafisa Latich, TRT World.
Now, a sinkhole in southern Japan has swallowed an entire 4-lane intersection in the city of Fukuoka. Take a look at these pictures. The hole is about 15 meters deep, and authorities are worried about those buildings on either side, that they could collapse. City officials are now working to prevent it from growing further and have ordered people to evacuate the area. Good advice. And just before we go, we'll leave you with a performance of one of the many celebrities that have come out to show their support for one of the presidential candidates. Let's see pop star in North Carolina. And the headlines are next. Stay with us.
Put your hands up for Hillary Clinton. Let's go. My mama told me when I was young, we were all superstars. She held my hand with my lipstick on, in a glass of covered wine. Come on, let's go. It doesn't matter knowing who you are, she said, 'cause he made you perfect, babe. So hold it tight, darling, you'll go far. There's a only way to say I'm beautiful the way I'm in love. I'm on the right track, I was born this way. Don't mind something, I'm on the right track, I was born this way.
Every day there is a newsmaker. It could be a person, a city, an event, a conflict. And the newsmakers affect us all. The conversations are in-depth and balanced. They come to life with guests from around the world exploring all sides of a story. It's real and it's honest. It's the newsmakers on TRT World.
Dünya 5'ten büyüktür.
You're watching TRT World. I'm Matthew Moore. A reminder of our main headlines. Voters. You're watching TRT World. I'm Matthew Moore. A reminder of our main headlines. Voters in the United States are casting their ballots in the presidential election after perhaps the most bitterly fought contest in a generation. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have voted after wrapping up their presidential election after perhaps the most bitterly fought contest in a generation. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have voted after wrapping up their campaigns in North Carolina and Michigan.
Great opportunity. Tremendous enthusiasm from everybody. You see it all over the country, all over the world. It's been a great feeling.
Humbling feeling, Dan, because, I know how much responsibility goes with this, and so many people are counting on the outcome of this election, what it means for our country, and I'll do the very best I can if I'm fortunate enough to win today.
Iraq's military command says the Kurdish Peshmerga have fully retaken the town of Bashika, just northeast of Mosul. They're now searching buildings for Daesh fighters and clearing booby traps. The ground assault to recapture the town was launched on Monday, backed by US airstrikes. It's part of a larger operation to retake Mosul, Daesh's stronghold in Iraq. Meanwhile, Iraqis fleeing Mosul have spoken of their final days before their escape.
10 days, we have been living under airstrikes for 10 days. We could not escape. All directions were blocked. The army would shell the Daesh militants in the area. Then when the army captured the town, Daesh began retaliating.
The situation was tragic. It was bad. There was no food, no water, and airstrikes targeted us.
In Syria, airstrikes have killed at least 7 children and 2 pregnant women in Idlib province. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says these strikes targeted the... And more than 1,000 lawyers and activists in Hong Kong held a protest against Beijing's decision to ban 2 elected lawmakers from taking office. It came a day after the Chinese parliament banned the pro-independence lawmakers from the Legislative Council. They were